Hello. All right, so we're gonna watch this Destiny versus Konstantin Kissin debate. If you're not familiar with Konstantin Kissin is he's one of those centrist guys, but he's from the UK, from my understanding, and he kind of goes to bat for Trump and right wing politics and anti-immigration stances and everything. And Destiny's been studying. Preparing for this debate for the past week or so, and so hopefully I'm looking forward to maybe blowing this guy the fuck out. This guy is I don't appreciate these people, especially who try to pretend that they're not right wing when they are right wing. So I hopefully can kind of point that out and call him out on that. But we'll see as we go along here. And then I'm going to be playing some Zoids Battle Legends in the background. I kind of wanted to play my Old Republic, my Jedi character, but I realized for something like this where I'm reacting to like a debate or something, it's hard for me to focus on both. And so I figured a game like Zoids is easy for me to play in the background without having to put too much like attention into it. That I'm able to still kind of understand, or not understand, but like take in what I'm hearing at the same time when it comes to like the debate. So yeah, we're gonna go ahead and do that. Give me a minute here. All right, let's get started.
Every new active subscriber directly contributes to how quickly we can produce these kinds of conversations for you.
You heard him, folks. Go subscribe to Pangburn.
Smash that like button on the video and make sure you leave us a comment in the comment section. Now please enjoy.
If by some odd stroke of luck Pangburn sees this, you should bring me on and have me debate people. Anyways.
Konstantin Kissin versus Destiny.
Are you the same as you were 10 or 15 years ago? What do you mean by that? The same. You're not unchanged, right?
Are you pretending to be a moron, or are you actually being one?
Your guys' definitions for everything change at all points in time. That's always the issue. That's always the frustrating thing when it comes to fighting.
Who's us guys?
Conservatives.
I'm not a conservative.
I know you say you're not, but are you sure you're not running for a political party right now? Because that was the most politician answer I've ever heard in my life of a conservative view on foreign policy. Over the past 5 years, so you do this thing where you're like, well, I have to choose between two things.
I'm not going to talk if you keep interrupting me. I'm not interested in this. Whatever this is. You are.
I'm literally not. I'm asking you a question. You just refuse to answer. This is the game. How did I do it again? I'm asking you a clear question. You can't give me an answer.
I need to get into the habit of putting like these little short clips, previews in the front of my videos. The thing is though, editing takes so much time. I wish I could hire an editor, but like I'm not at that point yet, obviously.
I'm not going to talk to you unless you listen to what I'm saying as well as me listening to what you're saying.
I am listening.
Okay, good.
Welcome to Pangburn. Are we ready to go? What I hope to see on the Pangburn stage here tonight is what I always want to see, and that's good faith, helpful discourse. The Pangburn maxim, the communication maxim, is that good faith and helpfulness are the minimum requirements for a fruitful dialectic. That's what we want to see. And ultimately, I hope this conversation tonight, when it's shared with the world, will maximize well-being for humanity in one way or another.
Wow.
So,
we're going to solve the world's problems, guys. We're going to have world peace after this debate.
Welcome to the stage, Konstantin Kissin and Destiny.
So my mission objective, I got to take out these radars, but I have a feeling if I focus on these manta rays, they're probably just going to keep endlessly spawning.
I'll kind of take the
probably getting a little too distracted on them.
I feel like when I hear people talk about things
So we're talking about immigration,
borders, mass migration, or national identity, there's kind of two questions that always pop up in my mind, and I never hear people actually kind of tack down what they mean when they say these things. So the first thing is, for national identity, I don't know as much about the various identities that exist in the UK, but I know for the United States, to try to find an overlap between identity from a gay guy in San Francisco versus like a farmer.
Thank you. Yes.
Not many commonalities.
I've been making this argument for a while now.
To speak of when you talk about
it's so obvious too,
especially
right?
when I'm thinking of it in the context of
like conservatives will acknowledge this. They'll simultaneously acknowledge that this is true, right? Like, oh, we don't want the country to look like San Francisco or Portland, or oh, you know, you're from a big city, you don't know what it's like for the rest of the country. And then simultaneously they'll do that and talk about how other people need to assimilate to the country. And it's like, well, wait a second. Assimilate to which part of the country? Because in other conversations, you seem to acknowledge or argue against the fact that there's other kind of cultures in the country that you disagree with. So, but of course, like the whole thing is that there's a foregone conclusion. I like to call them foregone premises. There's like a foregone premise that they actually own the culture of the United States. They just don't say that.
What type of immigrant would threaten
that
whatever unified identity, whatever those two things are? So I'm kind of curious, I guess, when I think about national identity, when I think about it being threatened by people, my first question is, what is the national identity that we're trying to protect for the United States or for the United Kingdom? And then when we talk about like migration or mass migration, what do we mean exactly when we say that?
Well, okay. So there's two questions there. What is national identity and what is immigration? Why don't we start in reverse and talk about immigration? Take Britain as an example, right? So I've lived in this country. I came to Britain from, it was just about Russia. Prior to that, it was the Soviet Union in 1996. So let's go back to 1991, because that's the data when we have the census. 1991. What has happened in the last 35 years? So in the last 35 years ago, this country had a population of 58 million people. Today, the population is 70 million. Almost all of that is due to mass immigration. So the population of Britain, the immigrant population of Britain, that's first generation, people who've arrived, went from 4 million to 12 million in the space of 35 years, right? It trebled in 35.
It's interesting, too, if you pay attention. I mean, politics in the United States are having an effect on the politics in all these other countries, too. Not to say that UK hasn't had, you know, their own unique issues or anything, but you'll notice that a lot of the narratives are starting to kind of be the same, and a lot of those kind of cultural divides within these other countries are starting to mirror the same kind of cultural divides that we're having in the United States.
Now, you might say, well, you know, is that a lot? Is that a little? Who knows? That is more people, in the last 35 years, more people came to Britain than came to Britain in the previous 2 millennia. So more people in 35 years than had come in 2,000 years. Now, that seems like...
So do you know why this is a stupid argument? This argument's dumb because when he says, oh, there's more people have come now than the past 2,000 years. Yeah, because the population has grown exponentially. But as a proportion, what we really want to know is, like, what is the proportion? Because you could also say that the population has grown more than it has in, you know, the past, whatever, how many thousand years. Because, like, just in general, the population sizes have, like, grown exponentially. Everything is exponentially higher than it was back then. Obviously not literally exponential in a mathematical sense, but you get what I mean.
Quite a lot, right? Now, we'll talk about some more facts about this, and we can talk about national identity. I'm going to take a little time, if you don't mind, just to lay this out.
Yeah, I guess just to kind of poke around as you answer.
Yeah, but hold on. Let me just let's talk about what we mean by immigration, right?
Okay. Well, then also the mass, because I hear a lot of these words will be like, it was a lot of people.
Well, hold on.
I was like, what does that mean? Yeah.
I'm explaining it. So
Okay.
More than zero. That's what it really means. You all know that.
That sounds like quite a lot of people. Is
Not
that fair?
necessarily, no.
Is that fair?
No, not really.
No.
In the
Not
context,
really.
like if I were to ask for like the total growth of wealth compared to like the last like 50 years, might also be
Yeah,
more
see,
of the last 2,000
same kind of
years, or the
analogy he's trying to
total
make here.
amount of carbon pollution, or the total amount of TV episodes or plays written or songs written. Like I don't know if I would just arbitrarily say I'm going to look at immigration and I'm going to measure it past some 1,000-year thing or whatever.
You don't think that more people coming into a country in 35 years than had come in the previous 2,000 years is quite a lot?
I just think that statement is like vacuous and meaningless. When we say quite a lot,
Konstantin's
like,
probably
should it
smart
have
enough to
been
know
less?
too that that's mathematically
what kind of
like a
immigrants
silly
should have
argument to
come? What does
make.
that
He knows
mean?
that he's
You're
being
making it into
like
a moral
manipulative to the
conversation. I'm talking about purely
audience.
Numbers. You might think it's a great thing, right? Like,
Well, to be clear, I'm
hold
not
on,
talking.
hold on.
Just to be clear, I'm not
Just-
talking
you
moral.
Keep
You say it a
interrupting.
lot, yeah.
You keep interrupting. So,
Okay.
if we're talking about quite a lot, you keep.
He keeps interrupting. Like, has Destiny had a chance to really like actually lay out an argument this entire time? I feel like Konstantin's talked like 3/4 of the entire time so far.
Trying to make it a moral thing.
I'm not making it a moral thing.
If we're gonna have a conversation, you're gonna have to let me finish a sentence at least.
Well, just don't
Or two.
misquote my position.
Okay,
yeah.
so just calm down for a bit.
I'm super calm.
I know you've got your Red Bull. Just have
I
some
have my
water,
Red Bull.
chill
I'm
out.
still super calm.
Okay.
Yeah. It's a very
Now-
simple question. Yeah.
If more people, if you're making a moral issue, it becomes very clouded and complicated. Let's just talk about what we're talking about in terms of pure numbers.
He wasn't even
right?
making it a moral issue. The thing is that Konstantin has like his debate tree. He's used to arguing like people on the left who may fall for this kind of bait or fall into these kind of arguments, but like Destiny isn't really this kind of debater. He's not really of the kind of SJW left-wing kind of debate style debater. And you would think that Konstantin would know better than to go down that route, but yeah, well, it's not going to work out for him here, I don't think.
To a country in 35 years than have come in 2,000 years. That is objectively.
Yes, we heard that already.
Now,
yeah, we know.
I think it's a good thing. Like, I like ice cream, and if
you can tell he's gotten a lot of mileage out of this argument,
and
hasn't anybody really like substantially pushed back against this argument.
But it's a lot of ice cream, right? We'd accept that. It's more, a scoop is not a lot of ice cream.
Yes, we know how math works.
So more people coming into a country in 35 years than had come in 2,000 years is objectively a lot of people. Okay?
Just to be clear, when you say a lot,
that wasn't the
that's
contention,
a normative
though.
value that's with respect to some kind of norm or when you say a lot.
Yes.
Yeah, compared to before.
Yeah,
compared
that's
to the entire
objectively,
span
yeah,
of the
that is
history of this
objectively true. It's just kind of a meaningless statement. Like
So
everything is a lot
you've
more
accepted
than the
that
past
what I'm saying
two
is
millennia.
objectively
Yeah.
true. I'm grateful.
Correct, yes. So it's
So
a meaningless statement, but yes.
Now that we've got there, what does it mean? Well, first of all, think about it like this. And again, it's not about whether you like it or not, whether you think it's a good thing or not, or a bad thing. The three biggest cities in this country in the last 30 years have ceased to be majority inhabited by the people who are native to this land. That's just a fact. And I am one of the people who's come here in that time. So I'm not saying it's only a terrible thing, but it's an objective fact.
It's a terrible thing when other people come in. It's a good thing when I come in.
London, and this has happened very quickly. London was 80% white British in 1991. It is probably around 30% white British today. So if you have seen that level of change in the city in which you live, think about this as well. 3/4 of the people who live in this country today are over the age of 35. So all of this has happened within the lifetime of one generation, effectively. That is a level of change that is A, completely unprecedented, B,
Holy
extremely
monologue.
transformative, whether you like it or not, good or bad, whatever you may think. You might think, oh, you know, the amount of different kinds of food has got better. It's true, objectively. But it's also true, objectively, that entire swathes of this city are no longer inhabited by the people who used to live here. Again, this is an objective fact. You can like it, you can dislike it, but that is something that is...
Is anybody arguing that it's not an objective fact? So it's not inhabited by the people who used to live there. Why is that? Is it because a lot of those people have literally just died off? Is it because they moved away? I doubt that most of it's because people moved away. I bet it's because a lot of those people died off and then just new people moved in. And the new people that moved in were not all of like one homogenous demographic. But the way that he says it, it kind of makes it sound like these people are getting pushed out. They're being genocided. It's white genocide. Oh my God.
It's happened. This is true
so
of
scary.
London, it's true of Manchester, it's true of Birmingham, and it's true of several other smaller cities in this country. By 2060, according to current projections, white British people will become a minority in this country. 2060 is the next 35 years, right? And that's the entire kind of demographic transformation. These are facts. Forget about people's opinions, my opinion, your opinion. In terms of illegal immigration, there are now almost 1 million. We don't know exactly because it's hard to measure.
Destiny's been pretty patient here.
1 million illegal immigrants.
He's Biden.
Today, which
I don't mean like Joe Biden. You guys ever played Pokemon back in the day? There was a move called Bide, where you'd hit that move and your Pokemon wouldn't be able to move for like 2 or 3 turns, but it would be biding its energy. The other Pokemon would be hitting it, and your Pokemon will like after 2 or 3 turns hit back. But it'll hit back for like all of the damage that was done to it within those 2 or 3 turns. That's what Destiny's doing right here. He's hitting his bide.
70 million is quite a lot. We currently spend 14 million.
Look at his reaction. He's just totally not entertained by this. I wouldn't be either because none of this really phases me.
Here. I'm talking about how much we spend to accommodate them and all other things. Now, 14 million, is that a lot per day? It's quite a lot. But also this is happening at an unprecedented rate. More people come to Britain illegally today than came legally when I came here in 1996.
Yeah, and also the population has grown larger than it did when you came there in 1996. Like everything has gotten bigger in proportion. In a vacuum, that statement's a meaningless statement. But you could see how like this kind of gets back to that short that I put out there, right? Truth to Lies and Statistics is like misrepresenting data and statistics. It sounds scary than it potentially is if you say it that way, but it could just be that everything has grown in proportion Or it could be that, hey, like it's grown at a disproportionate rate. But it's important to know, like, it's important to know, is that a rate that you're referring to? Is it a per capita rate? Is it just a nominal number? In other words, just like the number without like respect to like a rate or a denominator?
I'll say that again. More people come here illegally every year than came here in 1996 when I came here. That's the level of change when it comes to illegal immigration, and the cost of it.
I see Ibiro in chat. I saw some of your comments too, by the way. I won't have a chance to like respond to everyone. Don't, you know, no offense or anything. But yeah, I saw you in there. I appreciate it.
£14 million a day is increased by a factor of 10 in the last 10 years alone. So it's 1,000.
Obviously, like some of those videos I put out, especially I noticed with some of these right-wing figures, I feel like that's the strat. I'll get a lot of these right-wing audiences come in, and like they're giving me engagement, they're giving me views, so it doesn't bother me too much. I can't debate every single one of them in the chat, and it's really not worth the time. But like I'll pick out ones where I feel like, okay, like this will be like a good example for anybody reading to see like what a counter to like these particular arguments are. But otherwise, like if they're kind of weak arguments, just whatever, let it pass.
% more than what it was. Those are the facts about immigration. So when we talk about immigration and whether it's compatible with national identity, it depends what we mean. If we're talking
I gotta
about,
do more shorts. Shorts do a lot of numbers.
20, 30, 40,000 people a year, highly selective from compatible cultures as it used to be.
How long has this guy been talking?
Jesus
Jesus Christ.
I think probably quite desirable.
This is a debate or a monologue?
About what we've seen over the last 30 years.
Welcome to Konstantin Kissin's TED Talk.
With any sort of national identity at all. Now, I've been talking for a long time, so we can get to national identity.
Oh, look at this is the number. Like, it's funny because this isn't strictly like a race argument, but there's similar strategies that they use here. This is like that number 2 point that I made in my like short video, where he's using national identity as a euphemism for race. Because you'll notice, like earlier, he was talking about how it was like the white demographic of the cities. They're now 31%. They used to be 120%. Now they're 30. And so it's like, okay, you keep saying national identity, but then you're also referring to like ethnic groups and racial groups. Like you're using it as a euphemism, much in the same way that the race realists do.
Address that.
Sure. So I guess the thing that is a little bit strange to me about the immigration question is that sometimes I'll hear a bunch of descriptions laid out and I don't know exactly what I'm supposed to do with them. There's oftentimes a lack of a prescriptive statement. It seems like there's a little bit of fear of committing to any particular idea about what an ideal immigrant would look like. And then it feels like we're sometimes also lumping a ton of immigrants together. So for instance, when we say there have been so many more immigrants that have come here in the past 30, 35 years, but then we also mention like illegal immigrants or asylum seekers, these are all different groups of people. So I don't know why.
I separated them out. I talked about
but why,
legal immigration and illegal immigration, right?
I understand, but so the prompt has to do with basically can a country's culture, whatever, survive mass migration? Illegal immigrants are not mass migrating here. The mass migration.
They are.
So
I just told you more.
And then culture versus race and culture versus race and ethnicity, right? Just because the demographics change, like, oh, this used to be like 90% white, now it's 30% white. Is that the same thing as saying that the culture has changed? No, not really, right? But they use those words interchangeably. Now, you can make an argument, right, that you bring immigrants from like a different part of the world, and they might have different cultural, like a different cultural upbringing, and that's obviously that's going to influence things when they come over. But I don't like this argument. I don't buy this argument, and they kind of launder it in this kind of like idea that your ethnicity is like genetically tied to your culture. That's not the way it works. Like people are very much a product of their environment. One of the arguments that I make is like if you look at human beings, you just take a step back, like you're an alien staring down at humanity, and you look at humanity's like long history. We used to be in caves. And we used to be like in hunter-gatherer societies. And now look at us. Like the culture that we inhabit today is worlds apart from where it was, thousands of years ago. But genetically, we're not very different from, how we were thousands of years ago. And so humans are like highly adaptive. And if you look at that, it's clear that it's not just like race and genetics that's playing a role there. It's very clear that human beings are extremely adaptable to like long-term, even short-term, like cultural changes. And so like you bring immigrants from another part of the world, they're going to bring some of those cultural, things that they were brought up with them, of course, right? But also when they come to the new place, they're going to adopt some of those cultural things from the new place that they move to. And those things kind of like blend together. And if they are like, Konstantin was saying that the white population is a minority of these specific cities, not all of the UK as a whole, but like these specific cities. Metropolitan cities in general, if you look across the world, tend to be the most diverse places in the world. So it's like, yeah, that's pretty normal. But when he says that they're a minority of those specific cities, it's important to point out that you can kind of come away with the impression that that means that there's another ethnic group in that city that's now the majority, when in reality what it probably means is that the white population is like 31%, the black population is like 10%, the Hispanic population is 10%, the Asian population is 10%. So in other words, there's no ethnic group in there that has like a overwhelming majority. And so what you get instead is you get a melting pot of different cultures. And then another thing about this whole thing is this idea that you can preserve a culture by preserving like the racial makeup of a group or of a region. Number one, like if you look at the United States and pretty much anywhere else in the world, there are cultural differences among the same racial group depending on like where they live or their upbringing and everything. Like rural white America is not the same as, liberal, coastal, metropolitan white America. The Chinese living in those big cities in China that are like highly professional class, different culturally from like the hardworking labor class of the Chinese population, are different from the Chinese part of the population that lives out in the rice fields doing farming. So like the race part is not like the primary part of the culture, and you're not going to, you can't freeze time and freeze culture into a given moment. This is like, to me, it just sounds to me like conservatives want their safety blanket and don't want things to change. And it's like, even if we look at any like racially homogenous group in a country that has very little immigration over its long span, you're going to see that they're culturally different from how they were 1,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago, 3,000, 4,000, 10,000 years ago. Even within the same genetic group, even in the same racial genetic group, because like new technology comes about, new music, new influences, the times change, the things that are relevant to people change over time. So like those things are going to change over time. The real question is perhaps maybe not, is culture changing, but like, is it a good or bad cultural change? And we can do that like on a case-by-case basis, instead of just doing this thing of like, oh, is it white people? Oh, good culture. Black people, bad culture. Asian people, bad culture. No, actually, I think there's some elements of white culture that I don't like. There's some elements of Chinese culture I don't like. There's some elements of black culture I don't like. And there's some elements of all of those that I do like. And we can like be adults and just kind of look at the individual aspects of this culture and then actually grade them on their merit, rather than just looking at them and being like, oh, white good, black bad. It's stupid. Anyways, let's keep going here.
Illegal immigrants come here every year now than legal immigrants came here 30 years ago.
I understand that, but if you
So
look
they
at
are mass migrating.
so then are the legal ones mass migrating, or what? Is it just?
The legal immigrants are also mass migrating. It's possible for them
But
both
it's
to be.
What does it
10 to 1,
mean
right?
to
So,
mass
yeah,
migrate? What does that mean? Like, what is the standard there? What is the threshold? Because I feel like we throw that term out and it's like any amount of immigration to them is mass migration. But it's like, what does it actually mean? They'll never put a number or a qualification to it. There's never like a percentage that they're talking about. Is mass migration like 10%? Is it 50%? Is it 100%? What does that mean? Is it a certain number? Like what? It doesn't really mean anything. It just sounds scary, I guess.
Comparing the two, it seems like we're talking about different kinds of. We're probably talking about different kinds of immigrants. We talk about legal versus illegal.
We're talking about both, yeah.
Well, no,
I'm talking about both.
you don't see any difference between a legal immigrant versus an illegal immigrant.
Well, of course I do.
Okay.
But they are both mass migrating here. They're both coming here in unprecedented numbers.
Everything definitionally is unprecedented as you move forward in years. We have an unprecedented amount of technology, an unprecedented amount of energy generation, an unprecedented amount of like.
I think you might be confused about the meaning of the word unprecedented.
Unprecedented.
I mean, we are confused about the meaning of unprecedented. That word unprecedented is doing a lot of heavy lifting, and it's a way of laundering in connotations without actually having to own them. And the point that Destiny's trying to make here, if it's not clear, it's like to say like, oh, we've had an unprecedented amount of immigration because the numbers are higher today than they were in the past. The population growth today is probably unprecedented because historically the population just wasn't this size in the past. What is the birth, or let's look at this. because everybody freaks out about white birth rates, right? Let's just look at white birth rates. How many white people were born in 2024? Born to non-Hispanic white mothers fell to 49, so about 50. So what does that represent? Total U.S. births were 3.6 million, so about half of 3.6 million would be, am I reading this right? White births account for, so about 50% of 3.6 million would be like, what, 1.81 million? Okay, so what was the, or how many white people were born in 1920? 2920. Well, holy shit, we got a time machine. We can predict the future with Google. What the fuck is this? I broke Google. Google's spitting out binary right now. Or this be like hexadecimal. What's going on here? Okay, so based on total white population in the US was representing, okay. But what I want to know is births. Total white population percentage white. What percentage of Americans are white? How many white? Okay. How? Okay, hold on. So we know. Okay, no, that's not going to do it. How many white births were in 1920? I like barely reworded that, but maybe this will help out here. Based on historical U.S. Census data from 1920, the total number of live births, white and non-white, was 2.9 million. It's 2.9 million. Is that right? Okay. While specific comprehensive national breakdowns for white-only births were limited to registration states rather than the entire country, the overwhelming majority of the 1920 population was white. So I mean, we could probably assume it's around 90%. So it's like, what, the numbers would be actually pretty close. They'd be pretty stable here. Crude birth rate, 27.1. Did I have this right? This is 3.6 million. Let's go back a little bit further. Oh shit, I'm probably not going to get data that's anywhere accurate over here during this time period. 1776. Fuck it, let's find out. They do not exist. The total white population in the 13 colonies was approximately 2.5 million. The total population colonies, okay, regional variation, birth data. While comprehensive, the 1790 census was the first to provide detailed demographic data showing 3 million white residents, or 80%, okay. But how many births? We might not have data for that. But like, okay, if we don't have data for how many births were at this time period, let's just look at the population numbers. So we have the white population in 1790s, 3.1 million. What's the white population? What is the white population in 2025? 210.9 million. So that's a factor of what? So not quite, maybe like 6 times, 60 times? 60 times, right? So we can look at that and be like, oh, the amount of white people today is unprecedented. That's like, yeah, all these numbers are unprecedented because like these numbers grow. It's not literally exponential. It triggers me because I have a math background, but you guys understand what I'm saying. Like everything's growing at an exponential rate. So yeah, everything will be unprecedented. What we really want to know is, are these numbers like unprecedented as a rate? Or are these unprecedented because numbers get big, numbers grow? Big number, big.
It hasn't happened at that level before, yeah.
Right, so if we have immigration of 20,000 people a year, that wouldn't be unprecedented because we had that before.
Yeah, but the population is growing of the country, the population of the rest of the planet is growing, the economy is growing, there's a whole bunch of other factors at play. It's not like all else equal, there's just 10 million people that have shown up. Like there's other factors at play at all points in time as well. So
yes,
it's a bit reductive to say like, well, we have an unprecedented wave of whatever. There's unprecedented things happening definitionally every year forward into the future we go.
No, that's not true.
What's the thing that's been frozen in time?
I just explained it to you.
Yes, you laid out a bunch of numbers and I just explained why they're contextless and meaningless. But now I'm asking, what is the thing that's unprecedented?
Look,
or I'm sorry, what would be a thing that is not changing in the past 30 years? Like if you had to look at something.
One of the most amazing things of arguing with anybody from your position is the extent to which they refuse to understand what words mean. I just explained to you repeatedly what unprecedented means. It means that it hasn't happened before. There have been times in the history of this country when its immigration was in the tens of thousands, and for us to go back to that would not be going back.
Immigration was in the tens of thousands in the UK. When was that? When? Well, actually, let's just do this. Let me see if we have a graph. Immigration UK graph. Is this the UK? 1991. Ooh, man, there's arrival minus departures. So, okay, so we're not at 10,000. This is in the 90s. Still quite a bit higher than that. 2015. How far back can we go? 1967. So maybe around here. It's kind of hard to tell the scale of this here, but let's just say. So maybe in the 70s. And then we have non-EU goes up pretty significantly. So like we can give credit where credit's due. It looks like they had a big bump in 2020s. But also keep in mind, like from if the immigration was like 10,000 at some point in time, like Konstantin's saying here, then there was an increase all the way up to about like what? Almost 300,000 at one point in time before we had any, probably I'm assuming, immigration from like Middle Eastern countries that were destabilized. But we have 300,000 here. Before everybody started complaining about this, the immigration went from 10,000 to 300,000 without any, you know, I have to assume not any huge complaints from these kinds of guys. But it's a problem now, right? It's probably a problem because they are non-white.
Would not be going forward to something unprecedented. It would be returning to something that we used to do.
Sure.
Right?
And my question
and so
is,
what has happened in the last 30 years?
So
when
he says what we would used to do, what does he mean? Do we go back to 10,000 when, you know, the back when the year was like 1750, or does he mean we go back to what it was not too long ago before we had a huge influx in the 2020s, which would still be 300,000? Because something tells me that he doesn't even want 300,000. Something tells me he wants like 0, to be realistic here.
unprecedented.
Is there anything in U.S. culture, in British culture, that has remained the same for the past 30, 40, 50, 60 years, for the past 100 years, that doesn't have an unprecedented thing happening constantly?
Absolutely. I mean, that is what a culture is. It was what is preserved over time.
How?
A culture is what people do without having been told to do so by a law.
Can you? Yeah, but what is an example of a culture that is unchanging?
How much have you traveled around the world?
Probably.
Notice he didn't engage with that
Probably
question.
not, actually.
Okay. So then you should be able to very easily answer.
I'm
Here's an
about
example
to.
of a culture that exists.
Well, every time I try and answer your question, you keep talking over me.
Cultures that probably haven't really changed over time are probably cultures that you find like in the middle of the Amazon, like a tribe that's been totally disconnected from the rest of the world. Otherwise, like, I don't think that exists. Like, yeah, I mean, it might sound trivial, it might sound exaggeratory to some people, but like, go outside and go look around or read a history book. Like, no, things have changed, whether you like it or not, whether you want to acknowledge it or not, things have changed pretty much everywhere.
It's because when you answer, you ramble and say irrelevant things. So my question
How
is,
can
like,
I ramble in half a sentence?
you've been saying plenty of sentences. Do you think the speaking time up to this point is even, or do you think you've spoken more than me?
I have spoken more than you, but I haven't
Exactly. So
interrupted
then you've had
you.
an opportunity to speak. You're just not answering my question. So my question is very simple. What's a culture that you feel has been unchanged for the past 50 years? Or what is an example of cultural preservation? I feel like cultures are evolving all the time. It's definitionally a part of culture.
Of course. Cultures are evolving all the time, but if you were to be plonked in 1970s Afghanistan and 1990s Afghanistan and 2010s Afghanistan and 1950s Britain, 1970s Britain and 2010s Britain, there would be common themes that run through both of those places so that you would instantly recognize, I am in Afghanistan, I am in Britain. Would you accept?
Does he think that Afghanistan today looks like Britain today? What a stupid argument, right? Like his point is, if it's not clear, his point is like, yeah, you can go back to Britain in, let's say, the 1700s. It's going to be different from Britain in the 1970s. It's going to be different from Britain in 2025. But he's saying that even so, you should have some common themes. Not everything, but some common themes between these time periods. I don't even know if that's true, but let's just take that for granted, right? And then on the flip side, he's saying that in Afghanistan, you're going to have common things in Afghanistan. And these two cultures, even though these cultures evolve themselves, they're still different from each other. You can still tell the difference between these two cultures, no matter what time period you go into. But that's still true today, and yet he's having like this moral panic about culture today. Culture in the UK has changed, but it doesn't look like Afghanistan today. It's not like these two countries look the same. That's ridiculous.
Accept that?
I agree that different cultures are different. Yes.
Right. Well done. Good. So we've got there then.
Well, you just established that there are. This is like saying
Different
that
cultures are different, which means that they
wasn't
have
the
something
question.
about them
Yes, and
that makes them different.
If
right?
you have a brother, both of you will be different.
Also, yeah, that
in
wasn't the
entire
question.
Lives,
But
that
there
doesn't
would be
mean-
a family culture that you have
But-
that's different to other families.
But you wouldn't be the same as you were when you were 10 years
Oh
old.
my God.
You grow and change, right?
course.
So when you talk about
But you're
preserving
still the same
culture,
person, right?
What?
You're still the same person.
Yeah, but you're dramatically changed.
But you're
You-
still the same.
No. Are you the same as you were 10 or 15 years ago? What do you mean by that? The
I'm s-
same. You're not unchanged, right?
Are you pretending to be a moron, or are you actually being one?
So your claim was that we need to preserve culture.
This is
because cultures aren't
frustration
supposed
on
to
his part.
change,
I,
and then
no,
you're
that's not my
This
claim.
this point is so
Then
obviously
help me
true to
understand.
everybody.
So
I will.
Because,
if you
because
stop
So he has to,
remember,
virtue
this whole
signal at
topic
this point.
started with, I'm curious, what is the thing that is precedented? What's the thing that happens continuously through all of history that isn't changing? And then you pointed to the fact that Afghanistan and the United Kingdom have different cultures. Like, that's something that I would reject.
No, I didn't. I was just explaining to you what cultures are, which are the cultural differences between groups of people that remain fairly constant over time, despite changing.
But they
somewhat.
don't. What
Your definition
remains
of culture
constant
is the
throughout time?
difference between your culture and another
No,
culture?
I gave you my definition.
You just said. You said it
I-
was the
I came
differences
here-
between cultures that change over time that define one culture against another one.
Okay, let's reset. And
Okay.
you talk for a bit, and then I talk for a bit, and then you talk for a bit.
Well, no,
and
because I
talk
noticed
for a
that this is how it's
You know why he wants to reset here, right? Is because he's losing on this point here. He doesn't want Destiny to drill down further on this one, make him look more foolish on this one. So he's like, let's reset. I say something for a little bit, then you say something for a little bit. That'll give him an opportunity to start going off on another narrative tangent and kind of steer the conversation and steer the focus away from that.
See, it feels like a lot of these types of people, the centrists, the reformers, the MAGA, whatever, is you paint with such broad brushstrokes that by the end of a sentence, I feel like you haven't really said much at all. And I'm just kind of curious why when you guys speak about things like...
Well,
the
fill in your
preservation of
blank.
culture-
Fill in the blank. We're talking to an audience that already agrees with like this stuff. We don't have to say it. They know what we mean. And so we can paint with a broad brush because we don't have to own the consequences of what we really mean. We know that the audience that wants to like hear what we're talking about, they know what the euphemisms are. They know what the
I don't
dog
really hear
whistle
you
is. They heard it.
anything concrete. But when you talk about wanting to preserve something, you talk about how something has changed. I don't necessarily hear like what are the things that are changing that you don't like. You'll point to things like crimes, but I mean like crimes are illegal. Obviously, they shouldn't be happening. I just don't really hear anything concrete ever, and it's very unsatisfying to listen to a bunch of people kind of ramble on and on and on without ever having a clear point about what they're talking about. So I guess I'm just trying to figure out for British or American culture, what are these things that you feel are common, maybe you go back 30, 40, 50 years, that were common across the whole country that you feel are changing in a way that they never changed in the past?
He can't say white people. He can't say their race has changed. So what's going on in Konstantin's brain right now? He's trying to figure out like, what can I say that's going to signal race without actually saying race that Destiny won't pick up on.
Okay, done?
Are you going to answer that question? He's not going to answer the question. Go ahead.
I've attempted to answer your question many times, and I'll do
He doesn't.
so
He doesn't
again.
have a good.
However,
He doesn't have a good answer to get out of this.
First of all, am I going to be okay to speak now for a bit?
Yeah, no one's stopping you. We're waiting for you to
I
answer.
know what
Your question is about what is culture.
This is a good debate technique, or really just a good conversational technique in general. This is good faith conversation. Is can you repeat back to me what my question was? Sometimes you can say this and it can be like kind of condescending and rude, but it's also like if you just say it genuinely and without trying to be like it's a genuine good faith question. If we're actually having a conversation, we both know what we're talking about, we're both actually engaging with what each other are talking about, then you should be able to like say the question I said back to me, or not even questions. It could be a question or an argument. Can you repeat back to me what I said or what I asked, just to make sure that like we're actually like you're actually engaging with what I'm saying or what I'm asking, and so that we both know we're on the same page here.
You brought up crime.
That wasn't my question. My
It wasn't your
question is,
question.
over the past 30 or 40 years, what are
Again.
things that have changed
Yeah.
in American or British culture that you feel over the past 200 years before that were unchanging?
Okay. One of the things that has changed in Britain over the last 30 years is we now have extensive number of Islamist terrorist attacks, mass stabbings, mass rape of British girls by Islamist and Muslim grooming gangs. This is not something that happened in this culture before.
So, okay. So the qualifier was Muslim. Muslim rape, Muslim grooming games, Muslim terrorist attacks. But we have had terrorist attacks in the UK. We had like the IRA, right? But those weren't Muslim. So I guess that's okay. And I think I picked up some of Destiny's research stream for this debate earlier. He'll probably go over these points in a minute here. But I think Destiny looked into this, and I think it turned out that the rape games were a thing in the UK before even like the whole like Muslim rape gang case. And there's like one Muslim rape gang case that they like to cherry pick. But like even those are something that you had, but they just weren't Muslim. They were like UK white people that were doing it. So like culturally, again, in this case, is he using culture as a euphemism for race? Because like if we're saying it's behaviors and practices, well, we had those behaviors and practices before. But if he's saying what the difference actually is that it's Muslim, it's Muslim rape, it's Muslim terrorist attacks, then the reality is that what he's talking about really is, well, not race technically, right? Muslim is a ethnicity or a religion, but I think it's probably fair to say that it's really an ethnicity. And I think realistically, like race and ethnicity, these things kind of blend over each other. And so like when people split hairs over that, oh, I'm not being racist, I'm just targeting like this ethnic group. It's like, well, it's the same thing, right? You're ethnicist, I guess, but everybody knows what racist basically means the same thing.
Okay, so sexual assault and rape did happen before in
Did
British
you hear
culture,
the words
right?
I said, or did
So
you
you said
take
grooming gangs. I know there's the example from the 80s and 90s with the Rotherham
They're not from the
grooming
80s
gangs.
and 90s. They're happening right now.
What is another grooming gang example? Because I know there are rapes and stuff that happen, but I don't think there are...
Yeah, well, let me explain it to you. So grooming gangs, this is a youth.
Everybody knows. See, the thing is that Konstantin doesn't think that his interlocutor knows this story. This is a popular story in right-wing media, and a lot of people on the left don't engage with it. I mean, frankly speaking, it's because a lot of people on the left or liberals are not obsessed with like these racial narratives. But Destiny looked into this, which if you go into debate, knowing your opponent, knowing the things that they talk about, you can just pull up like what is the stuff that they like to hit on every time, and then just look up like the details of that story, look up any kind of counter arguments or whatever it may be. And so I think when he looked into this, that story, there's like one story that they lean on, and they try to like from that story connote to their audience that that's representative of like mass rape Muslim gangs all over the UK. But in reality, it's just one story that they keep repeating over and over again. And then the other thing is, I think when he looked into this, I mean, I was listening to this in the background while I was doing other things, so, you know, take it with a grain of salt. There were other rape gangs in the UK that were non-Muslim. They were like white rape gangs in the UK. But like these guys, they never talk about that. Constantine, the people like that, they never talk about that. So let's see what his response is going to be here.
We used to pretend that they're not what they are. A mass rape gang.
Okay, hold on in the chat here. Obiru, also one big thing about UK, they pretty much have legalized rape because of their justice system. I think the conviction for rape cases is like absurdly low, around 1% or so. Yeah, you know what? That's a whole other conversation. In the US, we kind of have some similar issues with, there's like this whole backlog of rape kits that are never actually tested. And I don't remember what the reasoning for that is. I remember reading about this in the past. I don't know if it's because like they didn't allocate enough resources to do this testing or whatever the case may be, right? But like, yeah, I mean, it's not even just the UK. It's probably a lot of different countries that just really don't have either the will or the resources to really adjudicate rape cases like they should be doing.
Gangs where young British girls, usually underage, but also often sometimes young women, would be plied with drugs, plied with alcohol, would be taken from the care homes where they were, predominantly by Pakistani, sometimes other Indian subcontinent Muslims. They would be targeted.
Man, the right is really focused on Pakistanis and Somalians right now, right? It used to be like Latino people. Before that, it was black people. They used to pick on gay people. Now it's trans people that they pick on. Right now, the flavor of the month is Pakistani and Somalian.
Primarily because they were white and British. So these were racially aggravated hate crimes. And they would be
I think that also turned out not to be true either. I think they're just targeting whoever they could.
So
that is a cultural change. Can I finish what I'm saying, please?
Okay, you're not going to answer my question. Okay.
I am answering a question.
Well, but my question
That is
was,
a
what are examples? I don't think this has happened outside of the Rotherham grooming gang, that whole scandal. There have been
Yes, good.
rapes,
Ask him.
there
Ask
have
him. Do you have
been,
another example? And I bet
gang
you he
rapes.
flounders
The
on
idea
this.
of like a coordinated grooming gang type mass Pakistani targeting British girls rapes, that type of thing is not a thing that I'm aware has been seen in Britain outside of the large Rotherham scandal.
So, well, I don't know. I think the fact that somewhere between 500,000 and 1 million British girls might have been raped by these gangs is quite a big deal, and it represents a change in the culture.
Is that true? That, I mean, that number just sounds like it doesn't pass the sniff test. I find that highly dubious and doubtful, but let's see if there's a response to this. I don't know if Destiny looked into this part.
I think rape is bad. I just think it's bad when white people do it too. I think it's bad when everybody does it. My understanding is right now for the crime stats in the United Kingdom, it tends to be more white people are even overrepresented in terms of sexual assault and rape. But I'm aware that there are immigrants that rape people as well. I think all rape is bad, but the idea that there is a mass Islamist, jihadist, rape gang-centered thing in the United Kingdom that's functioning,
So
I think
how many girls would have to be raped for you to admit that it's a mass thing?
This serves.
It's a mass
Well,
thing.
if
The question
Yeah, and it's good that he picks up on this. This question serves as a way to like detract from the point. The point is like, let's just establish whether or not like rape gangs in the UK are overwhelmingly like Islamic in nature or Muslim in nature, whatever it may be, or is it just something like there have been rape gangs in the UK of a lot of different demographic groups as the perpetrators, and you guys only have this one story of the Rotherham gang that you're focused on. He wants to pull it away from that now. And the question that he chooses is a question that is salacious enough that most people will take the bait. Oh, so like you're okay with rape then? How many rapes are you okay with? How many girls do you want to get raped in the UK, Destiny, before this becomes a problem for you, right? And it's very like emotionally charged. It preys on like that impulse that we have to not want to be people who are defending bad behavior and everything. And it's important for you to not take the bait on that, to go like, yeah, like of course I don't think rape is good and everything, but like let's get back to the actual question that we were talking about a minute ago. I'm not going to kind of let you sidestep that.
Is if it's organized. You have a huge problem with definitions. I'm sorry, let me try to keep this back. You're not understanding. You're not following the conversation.
Stephen,
I guarantee you that Konstantin is following the conversation. He's just not used to this specific kind of pushback, and he knows that he doesn't really have good answers to these kinds of questions here. And so he's going to try to shift it back to one of his dialogue trees.
But organized grooming gang
you've asked me a lot of questions, and every time I answer them, you ignore my answer.
At all, but
now answer my question.
Yeah.
Answer my question. If 500,000 girls have been mass raped in this way, specifically being targeted because they were not of a particular religion or ethnicity, how many...
I mean, I'm going to try to look this up real fast. I'm not going to dive into this too deep, but like this number, I feel like this number is bullshit. Just like straight up bullshit. How many girls in the UK were raped by Muslim grooming gangs? What do you call it? Muslim grooming gangs? Grooming gangs? So you have this one scandal. Allegations of media coverage, many of whom were Pakistani and British origin, whether this prevented proper investigation. Scholars, okay, terminology, statistics. 28.5 of cases of contact sexual abuse can be described as sexual exploitation, whether by individuals, group, okay. Base abuse noted that there is a lack of data on group-based offenses. Where does he get these numbers from? I don't know. Granted, I'm looking this up on the fly, so maybe these numbers exist, but I always try to be like as objective. I'm not afraid of the data and the statistics, because I mean, I found that on the whole, on net, right-wingers just don't really have like great arguments. But like, I'm not afraid to confront like a real stat or fact or whatever that might push in their favor, because like they might win like that little battle, they won't win the war kind of thing. But with me saying that, I don't want you to think that that number is there, because I don't see this number and I don't know where this number comes from. So I don't know where he's getting this number from. I feel like he's misrepresenting statistics. When he says 500,000, is he saying 500,000 girls were raped total in Britain in a given year? Was he saying 5,000 girls were raped by grooming gangs, including the white and the Muslim grooming gangs? where does this 500,000 number coming
Many
from?
of them would have to be treated in this way for you to admit that it's a mass thing. What's the number that makes a mass? Answer my question.
Wasn't. I don't know.
The
how you would,
answer
I
is a
don't know how you
number.
would identify
Give
a
us a
mass
number.
thing.
Give us a number.
The question was
Give
organized
us a
grooming.
number. You said
500,001. So you're
Okay.
right. You're right beneath the threshold. Maybe
it's actually
the question is
it's
there
actually
organized?
between it's half a million
Okay,
and a
so
million.
okay, I'll ramble for a
you've
second, and then
agreed
you
that
can
it's
ramble
mass.
afterwards.
So you
We're not gonna
agree
back
that
and
it's
forth.
mass.
My issue is because you guys, you do this thing over and over again where you won't accurately identify a problem. You'll invent these things because rape isn't bad enough. Now it has to be like a mass grooming gang rape thing. And then what happens is you conservatives, you play this game where you
Not just that, it was Muslim rape. Oh my God, that's the worst kind. That's what you ever been. You know, never mind. I won't go there.
falsely identify a problem, you lie to the audience about it, and then you manage to gain power. You go through.
It's not like that Christian rape. That Christian rape happens in a church. It's sanctified. Okay, it's different.
With some wacky scheme. Go figure, the wacky scheme doesn't fix anything, and then somehow you come back with the same recycled narratives over and over again asking for another shot at it. It's happening right now with Farage and reform. It happened with Brexit. Brexit didn't reduce immigration. It didn't help you with your economy. It didn't do anything really good for the United Kingdom at all. And then it's happening now with reform coming in and making all of these promises to the British people that you're going to be able to cut all of the revenues coming in. You're going to be able to increase all of your funding. You're going to have a no-wait NHS. And it's all built on the same lies over and over again that didn't help you affect any positive outcomes in the past, and it's not going to help you affect any positive outcomes in the future. You can sit here and you can be upset about it, but I watched you and Matt Goodwin debate on stage where you guys both made the bold prediction that once the Tories were out, your immigration numbers would be over 1 million per year. They plummeted to 300,000. I haven't heard you say anything about that. Your predictions were completely wrong, just as they were with Brexit as well.
Okay, so the audience is clapping. Just keep in mind, okay, whether or not we think you did a good job in that argument or not, just keep in mind that this audience tends to be like a, they're going to mostly be there for Destiny because Pangburn, the people who put on this debate, they tend to, or they have at least in the past couple of months that I've seen them actively, partner up with like liberal and left wing debaters, and so that's going to be what most of the audience is. Doesn't mean that he didn't have a good argument, by the way. Just, keep that in mind. Don't let those things sway you. I try to impress upon you guys to think critically and not get swayed by things like this.
Well, that was a wonderful presentation. The problem for you is I voted Remain in the referendum.
Because you hadn't been bullied by the Cambridge students yet. I'm aware of the history, but I know.
So, you've come here with a bunch of talking points. That's great.
Hold on. We can break down
Stephen,
anything you want.
stop interrupting.
Don't accuse me of having talking points.
Stop
Deal with my
interrupting.
arguments.
Stop interrupting.
Then address what I
Stop
said.
interrupting.
Address what I've said.
Stop interrupting.
Address what I've said.
Stop interrupting.
I believe in you.
Stop interrupting. I let you talk and I let you make your points. Have some respect for me and for my opportunity to express myself as well. That is how a debate is conducted. So stop interrupting. We started this with a conversation about mass immigration, and I gave you the facts on it, and I defined what immigration is, right? Mass immigration. Now, you're talking about culture. I also explained to you what culture...
Did he ever define what mass immigration was? I think he just said that the number's higher today than it was in the past. That's his definition of mass immigration.
Culture is. And I explained it to you by explaining that it's a continuity of certain things, which may also evolve over time. Now, in terms of your point about mass immigration since Brexit, I was not a supporter of Brexit. I didn't think it was necessarily a good idea. And I agree with you that it hasn't reduced immigration. But I don't see how that's relevant to this conversation. We have had mass immigration happen in this country continually over a long period of time, which has changed the country in the way that I gave you. And I gave you a number of examples, like Islamist terrorism, like grooming gangs.
Why that specifically?
I don't think you were able to address because they counter.
Why not the other
argument
terrorism?
you keep making, which is, well, nothing changes when you bring in 8 million people over 30 years.
Did I say that?
Can I finish, please?
Did I say that?
Can
Why do
I
you have to
finish?
invent
Can I finish,
points?
please?
You
Can
just
I
can't address anything.
Can I
say?
finish,
Okay.
please? If I
Well, pretend
interrupted
it's a
you,
podcast
if I
episode. Go ahead.
interrupted
You guys.
every
Hey guys, let Konstantin finish. He has like a few more lies and mischaracterizations to get through first, okay? Stop interrupting him.
time you misrepresent my argument, you'd never.
Every time.
So, can I finish, please? You made the point that Basically, what I'm trying to say is, not trying to say, what I'm saying is, when you bring in large numbers of people into a country from a different culture, that will necessarily change the culture. The other thing that I explained to you is, there's been such a large wave of immigration into this country now that has fundamentally changed the sense of British people about the place in which they live.
Has it though? And here's another question that's kind of worth asking, by the way, is no one's probably going to bring up this question because sometimes people get lost in arguing these topics on the terms of the right wing, and they forget about like kind of bring up your own arguments. So like, here's a question that I bet you guys never considered before, or maybe you have, but like we don't talk about very much. When we talk about it's changed the culture of Britain, well, yeah, I mean, culture changes over time. You get more people that influence the culture. It doesn't mean like the culture has changed 180 degrees. There might be some new influences. That's not necessarily a bad thing either. Like, hey, you know, you got, I don't know about you guys. Freaking, what is it, like falafel? That shit slaps. Is that the right food? I don't know. I'm not a foodie. I might have said something racist right now. Might have done a racism. I'm sorry. But like, what parts of the UK voted for Brexit? What parts of the UK have an issue with immigration? Is it the parts of the UK where there's a high amount of immigration, or is it the parts of the UK that are like rural and have like very little immigration? Because in the United States, the motherfuckers who complain the most about immigration are the ones who live in these homogenized enclave rural communities in the middle of fucking nowhere, where they haven't interacted with somebody outside of their immediate family or their cousins in like 250 years. So I wouldn't be surprised if it's the same in the UK. So let's just look. UK Brexit vote by or map. Okay. So we have 70% or more. And we have London is dark blue, so they voted against Brexit. This is one of the big cities where you're going to have a lot of immigration. Actually, let's do this. Immigration, population, map, UK. Okay. Immigration map of Britain. Where do foreigners choose to live? Oh my God. All right, so let's look at this side by side. All right, so look at, most of them are in London, and London voted against Brexit. These places that have very little immigration, these are the motherfuckers who have the biggest goddamn issue with it. So it's interesting when Konstantin's like, these people come in and they change the culture and everything. Well, it seems like the people in London are okay with that. And you might be thinking to yourself, right? Like, oh, well, of course, because the immigrants over there are all the ones who are voting. Well, let's look at well, actually, this map probably tells us, right? What is the percentage? Percent of foreign born. So they're foreign born. Okay, there's a high percentage, 55 to 60%. Well, that's foreign born. Doesn't mean that the voting age population is immigrant. But I'm also curious, do immigrants have voting rights in the UK? I'm assuming it's probably like the US where you need to be a citizen. By registering to vote, who can vote in the migrants' rights in the general election? There will be a general election on July 4th. On that day, people who are allowed to vote can go to the polling station, usually okay. Doesn't really tell me. Who can vote? Citizens of Cyprus, Malta are able to register. Holy shit. Can I just get a straight answer? Oh my God. See, this is the real, they think that the UK is falling behind because immigration. The reality is because they're falling behind because like I can't pull up a straight fucking answer. They can't get their shit together and give me like an easy, straightforward answer. I say this, but like if you ever go to the US government websites like DMV and shit, that shit's AIDS, so it's probably just government in general. Okay, UK Parliament elections. Across the UK, to vote in the election for the UK Parliament, someone must be registered to vote in the constituency, be a voting age, be either a British citizen, a qualifying Commonwealth citizen, or a citizen of the Republic of Ireland, and not be subject to any legal incapacity to vote. Prisoners serving, okay? So I'm assuming by this, like, they don't meet these qualifications. They're not a British citizen. I'm assuming they're not also Commonwealth citizen. I don't want to dive too deep into this. I'm assuming that these countries from like these Muslim countries aren't part of the Commonwealth. The voting rights of EU citizens living in the UK depend on where they live. As already noted, any foreign national, including EU citizens, can register to vote in devolved elections in Scotland. What the hell is a devolved elections? Devolved elections UK allow voters in Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland to elect representatives to their respective national parliaments focused on local issues like health, education. The eligibility is citizens of Denmark, Luxembourg, okay. But this doesn't, I mean, these nations don't include, these are EU nations, so this doesn't include the kind of immigrants we're talking about. And can immigrants vote in, oh my God, UK referendums? Can immigrants vote? Can immigrants vote in the UK elections? Oh my God. Why is this so hard? British citizens. Who can vote in UK elections? Qualifying Commonwealth citizens. EU citizens. Citizens of other countries. Citizens of other countries outside of the EU and Commonwealth do not have a voting rights in the UK unless they naturalize as British citizens, qualify under different recognized status. This includes US, Chia, hell's Chia, Brazil, Russia, Turkey, most Middle Eastern and Latin countries. Even if those individuals hold indefinite leave to remain, have lived in the UK for many years, pay taxes on property, are married to a British citizen, they are still not entitled to vote. Okay. So you get the point here. The point is like the regions of the UK where apparently the culture has changed in such a way where the citizens are like, don't want it to happen. Those are not the regions that are voting, you know, against it or whatever. The regions where the immigrants are actually residing, the residents there seem to be fine with it. Konstantin is like, you have a problem with this. And the people in London are like, no, we don't. And he's like, yes, you do. I get to decide for you. I'm speaking on behalf of the Londoners. Londoners have a problem with this, even though they apparently didn't.
It is affecting the demographic dynamics of major cities in this country and the way people feel about that. But all of those things...
And the way that people feel about that, well, no, they don't. They feel fine with it. The people living there seem to feel fine with it.
The facts that I gave you about immigration, they are what they...
By the way, there's a concept in sociology, I forgot what it's called. I thought it was called relative deprivation, but I could be wrong about this. But basically the idea is that if you live in like an area where you don't have experiences with people that are like different from you, and like this sounds obvious when I say it, right? But it's been researched and there's some legitimacy to it. If you live in an area where you don't have exposure to different kinds of people, you're predisposed to like distrust those people, to not empathize with them, to not really understand where they're coming from. And like, obviously this kind of lines up with what we're seeing here. Like the people who live in London around immigrants, they don't vote against immigrants because they probably see immigrants like, yes, they're going to see immigrants who are bad, but they also probably see a lot of fucking immigrants who are like fine, regular fucking people they interact with. And so they're not being spoon-fed from Twitter just negativity about immigrants 24/7 to shape their view of immigrants. They're able to see different kinds of immigrants and realize like, oh, there's good and bad ones just like everybody else. Except for conservatives, all of them are bad. Fuck you guys. All right, anyways, let's keep going.
You can think that they're good, you can think that they're bad. That is a separate conversation. The facts are what they are. Right. There's also a thing about how British feel.
He owned us.
When I came to this country in 1996, 3% of the British public thought that immigration was a major concern. Today, about 65 to 70% of British people say that there are too many immigrants in this
How much
country
is that to do with the media that they consume?
Now, I think
from people like
people
Konstantin
have a better idea of how they feel about immigration than you, Stephen, and that is how they feel.
Why do you think over half the British population believes that the majority of the immigrants here today are here illegally, if they've got such a great handle on it or a great idea about what immigration is doing to the country?
The reason that people overestimate immigration is people generally, when asked about things, overestimate pretty much everything or underestimate things terribly because people are not very good with numbers. But the other reason, of course, people aren't able to quote you the exact number of people who
I didn't ask for a quote of the exact number.
You said this earlier, and I'm addressing your broader point, which is why do people misunderstand the immigration statistics, is that people don't look at immigration as this is the number of people who came this year and this is the number of people who came last year. They look at the reality of their lives, they look at the change they see around them, and what they're really concerned about is the cumulative impact of immigration over the period
This guy has
of
a lot
their
of health.
lifetime, which, as I explained to you, has been huge, unprecedented over the last 35 years, and will be even more unprecedented in terms of its cumulative impact over the next 35 years. Now, it's true that immigration has come down to 300 or something thousand in the last year. Doesn't mean it will stay that way, but also I never predicted it would get to 1 million. I think Matt did. But the point I would make is the transformation over a 30-year period is what people actually care about, and which is what they're right to care about. Now, as for the point about illegal immigration, yeah, it's true. Illegal immigration is a smaller percentage of the total immigration that we have than legal immigration, but it's still higher today than it was 35 years ago and 30 years
He's
ago.
really trying to get a lot of mileage out of
why
this. It's
illegal
higher
immigration should be zero.
than it was 30 years
agree
ago.
with that?
Do we have any final thoughts before we move on to the next?
Yeah, I mean, every crime should be zero, but there's always going to be some amount of crime or some amount of illegal immigrants. I guess the issue I have is that, you say, why do the British...
So since they're moving on to the next topic, it sounds like, I will say, I think Destiny could have done better here by being a little bit more aggressive and really nailing some of those points that I brought up, which I think he probably had them in his mind, but he was trying to be, I don't know, conciliatory to like have a conversation back and forth. I would have really kind of hammered him on those questions, but I don't think he did bad. I just think he probably could have done a little bit better. Anyways.
British people not understand the exact numbers. I didn't ask for the exact numbers. It's like 10 or 11 million to 1 million. There are different estimates from 500,000 to 1.3 million or whatever illegals. That's a big ratio, 10 to 1 to be off by, to assume it's 50-50, that, or that there are more illegals than there are legal immigrants here. And I think the issue is people in your position, or people like Reform or Restore, depending on how far right you want to go, lie constantly about the immigrant
Reform and
population
Restore
in the United Kingdom. And then as a result of selling those lies to the people, you get these ridiculous plans or attempts to fix it all in the United Kingdom. And because the problem was never as severe as it was stated in the first place, the problem ends up not being solved, and then you exacerbate other problems. So at the end of the Tory government with this attempt,
I'm getting gang jumped right now.
Idea that you're going to ship people to other, other countries to have them processed first, or with the idea that leaving Brexit would give the UK greater control over their illegal immigrant population. And the reality is it did just the opposite. You didn't have the right to access the same people that would try to claim asylum in the EU, and then if they were rejected once there, to send them back if they came to Britain next. You lost access to a lot of these things. And then the same people that were in charge of pushing those ideas,
yeah, you're probably right over here,
telling you and selling you on the idea that reform is going to come in and somehow fix the very same issues that they've been lying about and have failed to fix in the past. And you might hear this talking point, this cope that, well, reform is different. We're not going to be like, the old conservatives. But then you've got, all your politicians are going to be MP Tories that are defecting to join the new Reform Party. So I don't know where all this new blood is going to come from. Yeah, I don't know. It just seems like a whole bunch of like, here's a fake problem. I'm going to put it in front of you. There is like a real problem here. Regardless of what you said earlier, I don't think rapes are good, mass rapes or normal rapes. I think there should be some probably cap on what type of immigrants and how many should come to the country. I just never really hear a discussion on any of that. I just hear 500,000 British girls have been gang raped by mass grooming gangs, and it wasn't like that when I came over in '96, despite the fact that those Rotherham grooming gang scandals started in the '80s. So I don't feel like I ever hear anything of substance being spoken about.
Well, it's a pity we didn't have someone from Reform on stage so you could rehash your Wikipedia talking points to them.
You're a Reform voter, though, right?
No, I've never
really?
I've never voted for Reform.
Would you vote for Reform in the upcoming election?
It depends on who stands in my constituency. Last election, I voted for a Liberal Democrat.
I didn't ask about last election. In the upcoming election, will you vote for Reform?
I will probably vote for the same person who's a Liberal Democrat.
Okay, so you don't think you would support the Liberal Reform guy? I don't know in your
Liberal
constituencies.
reform. There's no party called liberal
Or, I'm sorry,
reform.
you won't support the reform candidate in whatever upcoming election. I don't know what constituency you live in.
I just told you that at the last election I voted for Liberal Democrat.
Yeah, I know, but the
and
reason
at
why
the
you're saying that is because you won't answer for the next one.
Stop
You're
interrupting.
totally question
Stop
dodge.
interrupting. Stop interrupting.
Yeah, go for it.
I just told you that at the last election I voted for Liberal Democrat, and at the next election I intend to vote for him as well.
I'm just curious. You said in the past that you regret, or not that you regret, that you voted Remain for Brexit. Do you think that was a good vote? Do you think you should have remained, or do you think Brexit was a mistake?
I don't regret my vote for Remain, no.
Do you think Brexit was a mistake?
I think it had its negatives and positives, yeah. Like,
Are you sure you're not running for a political party right now? Because that was the most politician answer I've ever heard in my life. Do you think that on net was Brexit a mistake?
Every decision has trade-offs that are positive and negative.
Remember what I said earlier about saying words that mean nothing? Obviously, this is true, but
I mean, yeah, it kind of does say nothing. But let me ask you this question. If you were to ask him, like, all right, let's just think about the way that he talks about it. Does he talk about immigration to the UK as if it, you know, it has its positives or negatives, or does he, like, overwhelmingly characterize it as a negative thing? To, like, do this thing where, like, oh, everything has its positives and negatives. No, it seems like you don't actually think that. It seems like you only do that when you're trying to waffle on a particular topic.
I'm asking, do you think that Brexit on net, was it a mistake?
I think a lot of people think that Brexit ruined the economy.
I'm not asking what a lot of people think. I'm asking you on net. Do you think that Brexit was a mistake?
I think it had some things that made things worse, and I think it had some that...
If you were God and you could choose whether or not the UK voted 51% Brexit or 49% Brexit...
This is going to look really bad on Konstantin's part.
51% they would Brexit?
Because he should be able to just give, like, a straight answer at some point.
I honestly don't know.
Okay, but this, so the reason why I asked this question is to illustrate, I asked this question to illustrate how frustrating it is when people like you say things like, well, I voted Liberal last election, or I voted Remain. Okay, you don't stand by that anymore, though. You constantly do this thing. No, you don't. You constantly do this thing where you come on stage, or you go on your show and you'll say things like, I used to be a liberal, but the liberals have changed so much, or I used to be a left-leaning person. And the left, I know you've tweeted the dumb picture. I know you've done it. They've changed so much, and now
I didn't leave the liberals. The liberals left me.
You literally say things like Tommy Robinson makes statements to the left on immigration compared to Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama.
He does.
Yeah, okay.
He does.
I've heard you say
That's a
things like
fact.
right? But then when
That's
I
a
ask,
fact.
but then you guys say that everybody else has changed, and then I ask you about your past political votes, you won't defend them. So it seems like you're the one that's changed, which is fine, but you should just own that.
I voted Remain for reasons that were entirely different from the reason that most people voted Remain. The reason I voted Remain is I thought that it would weaken Europe's ability to stand up to Russia. I think I've been proven right on that. And I think the division within Europe has made Europe weaker in terms of its ability to stand up to Russia, and I think we've seen that. So in that respect, I think I was right to vote Remain. What I don't agree with is the narrative that a lot of people like to spin, that Brexit ruined the economy. I don't think that's true at all. If you look at the way other European economies are performing, they're performing even worse than the British economy. So my attempt to give you a nuanced answer is not my refusal to stand by my votes. It's an attempt to use my brain and give you a nuanced answer. Now, in terms of final, did you want to wrap up and move on?
Yeah.
So I mean,
final thought.
My impression of him, I don't watch too much of his stuff. My impression of him is that he's very typical for the kind of people that very much overemphasize like race things and immigration things. And he probably tries to pretend that he's like more moderate on it than he actually is, using, kind of the tactics I mentioned before. And again, I don't watch too much of his content. I don't know if he's being kind of cheeky and dishonest here, but if this is actually his position on Brexit and then like what he said about Russia and everything, I try to be fair. I won't be honest with you guys. I don't like conservatism. I don't like right wingers. Okay. But like, I feel confident that I can argue against them without having to like what's the word I'm looking for? Caricaturize them, misconstrue what they're saying and everything. On this specific point, on Brexit and on his position on like Russia and the EU and everything, this seems pretty reasonable enough. Again, I don't know if there's other things that he talks about on this topic that he's just not being forthright about right now. Maybe he is. Maybe he's like hiding his power level right now. I'm just trying to be fair, okay?
Thoughts on this topic? That would be great, guys.
Yeah, so final thoughts on this topic. I would just recap and maybe add one other thing. We have had a level of mass immigration into Britain that has been extremely disruptive over a fairly short period of time, that has created an environment in which major cities in this country are effectively no longer the domain of the native population of this country, which is very disruptive to the people who've lived here. I'm not one of them. I myself am an immigrant, but I totally recognize that that's happened. I think culturally there have been some terrible things that have happened. I mean, the example of terrorism and grooming gangs is just one of them. But the failure of integration more broadly has been a big problem, to the point where you now...
Did we ever show or establish that grooming gangs were, you know, primarily or exclusively a problem among the Muslim immigrants? Because I don't think we ever really actually adjudicated that. And if that was the case, I feel like it would be very easy for Konstantin to make that position clear. But it doesn't seem like he ever committed to that. And also when Destiny tried to ask him about that, he kept kind of dodging around that. It makes me think that that's not actually true.
So in the by-election in Gorton Denton, the Green candidate campaigning in Urdu, in a foreign language, in a language not of our country, which I think is a signal of the terrible divisiveness that is we are likely to see in other communities or in other constituencies where some communities haven't integrated at all. And I think what that signals is a kind of, you know, a democracy works when people vote on the ideas that are being offered to them, not the ethnic and religious background of the candidate or the things that they will tell them. And I think you're increasingly seeing that. So all of these things are big.
Isn't that like coming from his side though? Isn't he the one that's pushing like all this, you know, you need to vote based around ethnicity and maintaining ethnic, you know, certain levels of demographics and whatnot? That's just interesting. He accuses the other side of doing that.
And of course, a lot of this would have been much easier to manage if we hadn't also at the same time had the doctrine of diversity, inclusion, and multiculturalism, which have, instead of creating
the doctrine of diversity, multiculturalism, and inclusion, right? He says it like it's a bad thing. It's a bad thing to be inclusive of other people. It's a bad thing to be multicultural. It's a bad thing to be diverse.
Monoculture into which people are encouraged to buy in and integrate have instead created a society in which people are encouraged to see themselves as members of an individual community, which I...
Well, that's probably true in the UK, even before you had immigrants. Like, are we really going to pretend that the culture of London is the same as rural, the rural parts of the UK? Are we going to pretend, for example, that we haven't had long-term tensions and even like literal fighting between like the Scots and the British, the Irish and the British? Like, it's not like, why are we pretending? I hate this term monoculture. I don't know when people started using it. I know that a few years back, I made the argument that the United States has never had a monoculture. I didn't even know that was a term that people used. I just kind of used it as like the opposite of having a multicultural kind of thing. But now I start to hear people say it unironically, like this is like a real thing, like a true thing. Like we just take for granted that it's true. Especially in the United States, okay? UK, I don't know everything about UK, but even so, you heard what I said about it. I don't think that you could actually make the case that the UK had a monoculture before immigrants arrived. But especially in the United States, we have never, ever, ever had a monoculture, and that is not an exaggeration. If you have like an education on the formation of the 13 colonies, never mind the Native Americans. Pretend the Native Americans weren't even there. I mean, we do that already, right? But pretend they're not even there. The 13 colonies themselves were not a monoculture. If you look at like Louisiana has French influences, right? Cajun. You look at Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania was established as the Quaker state. Like a lot of these colonies that were formed were different religious sects, not SEX, SECT, that were fleeing religious persecution, establishing their own little independent colonies. These colonies were like, they didn't have like telephones and fucking smartphones, and they couldn't get on FaceTime with like, oh, I'm gonna go talk to my friend William in the freaking Rhode Island colony, 100 miles down the road over there. They didn't do that. And for like a certain part of their development, they were developing independent from each other. And probably they had more communication with the local Native American tribes. And so you're going to tell me that these different colonies, these 13 different colonies that were forming at that time, who were like interacting mostly with these Native American tribes that they're around, you're going to tell me that they all had the same culture? Bullshit, right? You're going to tell me that Texas has the same culture as Malibu? Bullshit. You're going to tell me that Seattle, Washington has the same culture as fucking Tennessee? No, it doesn't. Let's stop pretending. We never had a monoculture. I hate that term. It triggers me. I'm triggered.
I think is essentially the end of a democratic process the way we've understood it to this point. So I think these are all terrible developments. And
Democracy is when we all have to have the same culture and we all look and dress the same and act the same. We all have the same ideas. Apparently, that's what democracy is.
So I don't know. I don't know what the monoculture is.
Final thoughts are we going to have?
Well, I mean, when we introduce new concepts like DEI was why Liz Truss, helped 700,000 people come to this country from mainly non-EU places. I just don't know how DEI was the policy there from the Tories that enabled all that mass migration. And when we talk about the monoculture,
you're right,
I don't know about the United Kingdom. I mean, Scottish people don't seem like they share a monoculture with English people. I feel like rural people.
Look, I pre-watched.
Don't have much of a monoculture. I don't know if they ever say monoculture. I know in the United States, we talk all the time about the difference between city slickers and the good old people.
Yes, thank you.
In the country and doing the farms and everything.
Good.
But then we're also simultaneously very concerned about demographic change in the cities.
Let the diversity flow through you.
It seems like
Let the DEI flow through you.
People hate the urban-related culture anyway, so. Yeah, I don't know. It'd be interesting at some point, maybe at some time in your life, if you ever wanted to dive into these issues for real, maybe on your show or with somebody you're more comfortable with, who won't challenge you as much. It'd be interesting to hear a conversation about what do these.
Oh my God, I'm actually going to win this battle this time.
Culture, and the answer is, well, some people bring crime. That's not culture. That's like changing culture would require you to identify some fundamental aspect of the culture of a country, and then and then to point out to how that fundamental aspect is changing. When you say immigrants are coming and a lot of them commit crime, it's not really a real answer. It's not very satisfying. It's not really getting to the heart of the issues. And
Shall we move on to wokeism?
Sure.
So the question is, speaking
It
of
sounds
culture,
so stupid whenever I hear it.
Has wokeism caused harm to the political climate?
You want to go first again?
Yeah.
Sometimes I just think it's amazing that conservatives even say the word wokeism unironically and think that it like sounds, I don't know. Sounds cool, sounds smart. Like you sound like a. Does anybody else get this notion when someone says wokeism, like unironically, like it sound like you're talking like a baby, like you're using baby language? Is that just me?
Sure. My question is going to be the exact same as the last one. How do we define wokeism, and can we name like 3 woke policies that we think are destroying Western culture?
Wokeism is when immigrants and diversity
in this debate, so why don't you define
and
it?
LGBT.
Well, the thing is, I can't because your guys' definitions for everything change at all points in time. That's always the issue. That's always the frustrating thing when it comes to fighting.
Who's us guys?
Conservatives.
I'm not a conservative.
I know you say you're not, but the conservative identification of wokeism and the idea
You will know them by their fruits.
Forget about conservatism. Let's talk about wokeness. So what would be your definition of wokeness?
In the broadest sense, usually it's social issues that are very, very far left of the norm, I guess. But these positions in the United States at least tend to be held by...
Such as?
It might be certain things related to... I mean, trans people are obviously the hot go-to topic for everybody. It might be things specifically related to trans people. It might be...
You guys, are we cooperating with Blue Unicorn or not? I have not been paying attention to the story in this game at all, but... You guys decide. Playing an RPG game.
They call it CRT, now they call it, or there was affirmative action, then CRT, then DEI. It might be people who are socialists, about the economy, or whatever that means to people. It really depends on where you're at, who would consider what woke, or what the conservative boogeyman of the day is.
I don't know what the conservative point of view. So your point of view is that wokeness is about trans people and DEI? That
seems to be the case when I look at conservatives.
So that's your definition.
I don't define things as a wokeism. It seems like a really...
Constantine's using the Andrew Wilson strat right here. I'm not going to define wokeism, even though it's like usually my side that has the big, bone to pick with wokeism. I'm just going to sit there and like cherry pick whatever definition you give me, even though Destiny probably doesn't give a shit about this term. It's usually a term that conservatives use. So I think the reality is why he's not like given like a super crazy definition that he cares about is because I think most of us probably agree, like we don't give a shit about this word. It's something that conservatives obsess over.
Really vapid, stupid definition. I would just talk about the issue or the policy itself.
I guess your issue is with the topic of our debate then.
Well, no, because I think that you obsessively talk about wokeism, so it's probably a good thing for us to have a discussion
I'm asking you to define it so that instead of continually asking me questions and then pretending not to understand my answers, we actually address your argument. So
the irony of him saying that.
Feel free to ask me to explain your answer. I can do it with ease. They're very simple. You only need the cognitive power of like a 9-year-old to understand them. So
your definition of wokeness is? Again, just coming back to it. So,
If
we're
you
clear
take
about
the
what we're
median
discussing.
view on social beliefs, the things that are to the furthest left are the most progressive, the most college student-y, young things. They tend to be around like gender things or minority issues or LGBTQI, whatever status. These tend to be like things that people identify as woke.
So what we're discussing in this section of the debate is whether far-left politics and progressivism has ruined society. Is that the discussion?
Yeah, sure.
What would you mean?
The question was on wokeism.
Right.
The issue is...
And I got you to define it as far-left progressivism.
Yes.
So...
Insofar as I would define it, I don't see it as a major threat, at least to the United States, because I don't think that the people that tend to hold these views have any real political power. It tends to be college kids and people on...
It was a mistake for him to concede this point, and I get it. Konstantin's going to be such a nitpicky figure in this thing. He's just trying to move the conversation along to even have anything to debate on. But make Konstantin answer this question, and if Konstantin doesn't want to answer it, just be like, okay, cool, then you don't have a problem with wokeism, right? Okay, cool, let's move on then. Guess we both agree then. And he'll probably bite the bullet on that, because, oh, I didn't say that. Okay, then what are you saying? Do you have a problem with wokeism? What is your definition of wokeism?
Twitter, but conservatives are very concerned about this, and they talk about these issues all the time, and then they use them to power their...
You guys got to vote in chat. Are we, the game that I'm playing right now, are we cooperating with the blue unicorn, yes or no?
Policies that end up being...
I don't even know what they are. Don't ask me. I don't know what the blue unicorn is, but
woke stuff was progressive.
Just vote with your feelings.
Really manifesting in a real way anyway, and now I have a country where half the states don't really have the ability to get an abortion for women because people thought that every 4-year-old was being forcibly transitioned to another gender. It's my issue with it.
Well, that's your country and your issue, but just coming back to our definitions so that we can know what we're discussing. What you're addressing is, has far-left progressive politics had a negative impact on our society? That's how you understand this discussion, correct?
We got one vote.
Yes here and you're going to go,
congratulations, we're not going to cooperate with the
yeah, I guess
blue
yes,
unicorn.
that would be my understanding of this discussion,
okay.
yes.
So,
yes.
Good. Now we know what we're actually discussing. So, in terms of its impact, I mean, one of the most obvious things, and I brought up...
What is your definition of wokeism?
I agree with you. I agree with your definition.
Okay. All right. Okay. I think it's okay.
What the fuck was all that for then in the first place?
That's why I did it, so that we could agree on the definition.
Oh, okay. It felt a little bit more passive-aggressive than that, but my bad.
Well, that's your bad. Yeah.
Okay, go for it.
I've worked out the tricks that you play, and so I've trapped you in your own logic.
And to be clear, the trick that I just played was asking you for the definition of a term.
Yes.
Okay, gotcha. All right,
that's
my bad.
Right.
I know that we don't like that here.
Exactly
okay,
right.
my bad. Okay, go ahead.
That's exactly right. Because what you do is you don't define it yourself, so that you can then argue with my definition for half an hour, and so we can't have the actual debate. Now be quiet, and
I'll define my terms if you want. Well, I'm only going to be quiet. I'll define my terms if you want me to, but wokeism is a term you guys use.
It took me about 10 minutes to get you to define woke. I'm glad we did it. Now we can have the actual discussion.
Now you can use my definition. I'm glad I could
now
provide
we
you
can
with
have
one.
the actual discussion.
Okay.
Now we can have the actual discussion. So, if your understanding of the question is, has far-left progressive politics made our societies worse? I completely agree with your definition, and I agree with the premise of the question that it has made things worse for a number of reasons. I mean,
Look how much time we wasted. We probably wasted like 2 or 3 minutes just going through that whole entire exercise when Konstantin could have just opened up this entire segment by just saying, yeah, I think that wokeism is destroying society or wherever the fuck it may be. This whole 2-minute exercise was a dishonest exercise. Everybody knows what we mean in the context of this conversation. We don't have to play this stupid game.
Trans thing became a big talking point because it's so ridiculous, not because it's so hugely actually impactful on society. Although I do think a small number of children being given puberty blockers and an even smaller number of children being given gender transition surgery is a terrible thing that's happened.
Is that something that's happening? That doesn't happen in the United States. I don't know if that's happening in the UK. Do they have gender transition surgery for minors in the UK? Something tells me that that's not true either.
I think more broadly, though, I mean, one of the most obvious examples is we now have a society which has, I mean, it's not codified and it's not expressed in, in the, no one says publicly we now discriminate against these groups of people, unless occasionally they do. So, for example, the Royal Air Force in this country, when they were in a recruiting drive,
unless they
were really struggling to get pilots, and there was a woman there who got fired from the Royal Air Force because she refused to go along with the policy. Her supervisor said to her, "We're not hiring any more useless straight white men." She said, "I don't agree with this policy, it's discriminatory," and she was fired. We've had a system of anti-male, anti-white.
Can I just ask a quick question?
No,
So if I were to
no,
look
I'm not
that up,
finished
the
yet.
Royal Air
I'm
Force
not
had a
finished
policy
yet.
of not
I'm
hiring
not,
straight
I'm
white
not
men.
finished
Is
yet.
that true?
I'm not finished yet.
Okay.
The purpose of something like this is like you can lay out a bunch of claims. Basically, you're going to gish gallop. You're going to spin a whole narrative, and the other person doesn't have a chance to even see like all the things that you're laying out. Are any of these things true? Do I get to challenge these things? Do we get to question whether or not these things are true? We just like move on to the next thing. He just kind of lays out a bunch of claims. We don't even get to check these claims. We just move on to the next claim, next claim, next claim.
I have a feeling it's not, but okay.
So you can. This is something you can look up. It was covered extensively in the news in this country. Probably wasn't covered that well on Wikipedia where you did the research, but
No, but on The Sun and all of your
but
favorite
it was-
publications,
it
I'm
was-
sure they talked about it a lot.
no, actually, it was covered extensively across the
And
mainstream
that what they
media.
covered was that the Royal Air Force
Can
was
I
not
finish
hiring
my
straight
points,
white men. Well,
Stephen?
you seem to
Stephen,
respond to some things, but
just
not others.
well-
So that wasn't the policy. I can tell because you're not answering
That,
but that's okay.
was the policy that was pursued by the Royal Air Force. It was revealed by this whistleblower who was fired for revealing it. The BBC in this country has internships that are not available to white people. We effectively have created a system of passive, tacit, sometimes open discrimination against different groups of people. And one of the reasons that the sort of reactionary sentiment, which you try and paint me as representing, which I don't, is rising
I mean,
in this country. and
what he
rising
just
quite
explained right now
quickly.
is a reactionary sentiment. This idea that like, oh, society is now structurally against like white people because we've set aside some programs to help out a historically marginalized, disadvantaged group that is like typically discriminated against. So for example, in the United States, probably true in these other countries as well, if you submit, they've done a few studies like this. If you submit applications for a job and the applications are one-to-one exactly the same, and the only thing that you change is the name of the applicant, the white-sounding name is the one that gets chosen significantly more than a name that sounds ethnic. And so we like to pretend and talk like we live in a race-blind society. I don't see color. There isn't discrimination. And so if we have like affirmative action, now we're making society discriminating against white people or whatever. But the reality is that society already has discrimination against these marginalized groups. Not only because historically they've been disadvantaged, or in some cases enslaved and then segregated for hundreds of years. Black Wall Street gets bombed by the white population. They try to build up their own industry. It gets destroyed. So not only because like the generational disadvantage that they have, but also because extantly, currently, they also get discriminated against with like hiring practices, frankly speaking, just kind of like the social, the way that people like socialize with each other and interact in the world. So that exists already. The purpose of affirmative action is to try to, at least to some degree, counteract that force. We talk about affirmative action as if it's not countering another force that's moving in the opposite direction. We talk about it as if it's only just, oh, now society is just discriminating against white people. And so that sentiment of only looking at affirmative action through the lens of like a race-blind, a color-blind society, a vacuum, like we live in a vacuum and you don't already have discrimination against the groups that you're trying to help out or trying to level the playing field for, is a reactionary sentiment. I think most people that are not reactionary, if you have a genuine, honest conversation with them, like normal-ass people, even normal-ass people who aren't like super progressive, if I have a conversation with my uncle or my grandpa or whatever, and like I ask them like, hey, do you think like this is a thing where certain groups of people, they get discriminated against in hiring and whatnot, they could probably say like, well, yeah, that's probably true to a certain degree. I don't know how true that is. Maybe it's not, as true as some other people say it is, but yeah, that's probably true to a certain degree. This notion that affirmative action is now shifting all of society to be discriminating against white people in society as a whole, in these societies. And really, it's kind of more just like, what is the ethnic dominant group in that society? In China, it's going to be the Chinese, and the Chinese are going to discriminate against other minority groups in China. In UK and the US, it's going to be white, populations that discriminate against these other groups. And sometimes it's not like a deliberative, hateful discrimination. It might just be that you subconsciously see the white applicant and they seem more familiar to you. They're just, you mesh with them easier because maybe you guys had more similar upbringing. You guys hang out in like similar kinds of circles. And you may not even realize, but like if you do that at a systemic level, That means like you have all these like black and minority people that are getting passed up on jobs constantly. But if you go on social media, we talk about hiring practices as if all like every white male in society today is constantly getting passed up for jobs and promotions because of all these minorities. When in reality, when you do the research and you study it, the reality is that society, it's not slavery, it's not a Holocaust, it's not Jim Crow, but it is still something. And there is a bias in favor of, white individuals because white individuals own the power structures and they're going to have subconscious biases. Much in the same way, like a lot of people on the right will say like, oh, groups of people will favor their own people. And I think that's like a little bit too reductive. But if they actually believe that, then they'd be able to acknowledge that society then is structured such that the power structure of white people are favoring white people. And then it, as a consequence of that, disfavoring the other groups in society, but they won't admit that. They want to have their cake and eat it too.
Including ethno-nationalist sentiment, is because of this. And the reason I opposed wokeness from the very beginning and far-left progressivism
what a brave guy
was that it was obvious to me that the number one consequence of pursuing radical left-wing progressivism and racial essentialism of this kind would be,
but it's not racial essentialism.
The majority population would begin to pursue identity politics for itself. If you discriminate against
racial essentialism, is this idea that like you are your race and that's it. That's not what progressives talk about. That's not what left-wingers talk about. What they talk about is that is part of your identity. That is part of the relationship that you have with the society. That's not all of your identity. That's not the entire conversation, but it is a factor. That's not racial essentialism. Racial essentialism is like that shit that we were watching with Osmongold and Tectone the other day, where like everything keeps coming back to race. Race has to be, race is the reason why you have your culture. Race is the reason why you have your intelligence. Race is, X, Y, and Z thing. That's racial essentialism.
White men and say so.
By the way, identity politics is universal suffrage. It's anti-discrimination law. It's desegregation. People talk about identity politics like identity politics are bad. And the reality is I think a lot of people cuck themselves out. They got bullied into like, oh, I'm not an identity politics person. I'm not like the other liberal. I'm not like the other progressive. I'm not like the other leftist. No, identity politics can be a good thing. It can be a bad thing. Identity politics is the Holocaust. Identity politics is also desegregation. Identity politics is, Hitler-esque racial hierarchy, Aryan supremacy, white nationalism. But identity politics is also women should have the right to vote. Identity politics is also gay people should probably have the right to marry like everybody else. Identity politics isn't good. It's not bad. It's just a category. Some of those things are good. Some of them are bad. And we can stop pretending that we're babies and have an adult conversation about it.
Openly, it's going to be a very short period of time before white men look at that and say, well, if we're now picking people for jobs based on skin color, white men are going to start thinking that. Is he being a racial essentialist? What? That's crazy. Now, or I'm the oppressed majority now. We need to look after my interests. And the reason you see the reactionary forces rising both in America, in the rest of Europe, and
is because of the kind of rhetoric that Konstant engages in.
Pushed into this corner by woke leftists, and that is one of the major ways that this movement has damaged.
You made me do this. You made me abuse you.
So, I would say the least impressive thing about conservative predictions is that typically what they'll do is they will build their own enemies. They will cry about the enemies, and then when they manage to convince everybody else that those enemies are real, and then those people react against those enemies, they try to say that, well, it was the enemies in the beginning that caused this particular problem to come about. And I guess the issue that I have is when it comes to woke-related stuff, it's hard to find ever, like, what are the particular DEI policies or affirmative action policies that we're talking about. It's always some vague allusion to airlines don't want to hire white pilots, or they lower their standards for black pilots, or these things that tend to not exist when you actually dig into them. Now, I don't know, maybe it is the case that the Royal Air Force actually had a policy of not hiring straight white men. It did, yeah. Okay, I'll look into that. I'm curious about that. I have a feeling when I look into it, it's going to be completely untrue, like most of the stuff that you bring it up. But I'll look into it. Maybe it was true. And, if it is, I would say that's not a good thing, that you shouldn't be doing stuff like that. Okay. But I guess the issue I have is, when you talk about magnitude, I think you said earlier that sometimes people fixate on these issues a little bit too much, but it's because they're such common sense issues. When I look at the United States right now and I think how many trans people are there, how many people are doing stuff related to trans people, the number of people is incredibly small. It's like 1%. And the idea that would somehow cause so much of a population to become reactionary that as of 30 minutes ago, I'm pretty sure Iran has tried to bomb like 7 different countries because we have a president who is a madman who is going on a rampage against the entire world insofar as trade and bombs goes. I just can't, in my mind, rationalize how so many of these smart people in the, I'll say in the center like you, who say, well, I can obviously identify that this is a problem. Why don't you ever identify any of these super obvious problems on the right, or any of the super obvious problems that are reactionary to the other things that were reactionary, especially when the issues in the United States on the right are represented through every single pylon of power that the conservatives have, and on the left they're in colleges and on Twitter and Facebook and sometimes in AI world on Sora.
This is an article from Sky News. Could you just read out what it says, please?
So I see the AI
Sky News. Isn't Sky News like a tabloid
read out the
news?
headline.
Well, I don't know if there's a headline or if this is a...
Read out the headline.
Okay, so it says, applicants seeking to join RAF described as useless white male pilots in bid to hit impossible diversity targets.
Described by that by who?
Just to be clear, just so I can understand.
Thank you.
Is this headline the same as no straight white men were hired? Or
No.
they had a policy of not hiring straight white... Wait. I'm just so curious. Do you understand the difference between somebody not being hired because they're white? Because I'm not going to sit here. If you're going to ask me, like, do you think there were ever racist people or even against white people? Of course there are. But you understand there's a difference between the entire Air Force having a policy of not hiring straight white men versus, I guess there was an email where some straight white candidates were skipped over. I don't even know if it was because they didn't meet qualifications or not. They used white men to describe them, but they also called them useless. I don't know if it was because they were white or not. You know there's a difference between those two things, right?
So you don't know the story?
Do you know there's a difference between those two things or no?
Yes, I do. Now,
Okay,
be
thank you.
quiet.
Okay,
Now-
gotcha. Because I was asking for evidence of mine, but you gave me that. So like I said initially, I had a feeling if I looked this up, it wasn't going to be
you ever gonna
what
let
you
me
presented
talk?
it as. Yeah, no, go for it.
Okay. So you just
Konstantin
denied
hasn't
the
had a chance to
existence of
talk.
this and you question
Guys.
I did not deny the
Stop
existence
talking.
of that, but go
Stop
ahead.
talking.
You seem to have a lot of trouble following what I'm saying.
Stop
That's okay.
talking.
Okay.
Look, the only way to have a conversation is when people talk in terms.
No, it's not. The only way to have a conversation is when two people are making a good faith effort to understand each other. My question was,
Right.
did the RAF have a policy of not hiring
Yes.
straight white men?
Yes.
You showed me an email that said there were
That they
applicants
had
that
that
were
policy.
rejected that were called useless white male pilots or whatever.
They rejected applicants in a bid to hit diversity targets, which means they discriminated against white men in favor of other groups.
Yes, but that
Yeah.
doesn't mean that in this particular email, but that doesn't mean that they were not hiring any straight white men
I
for
didn't
some...
say they were not hiring any straight white men. I said they were discriminating against them in favor of other people to hit diversity targets, which were described by the people who were charged with recruiting them as impossible to hit. In other words, they were deliberately undermining both the efficacy and the fair treatment of people in their hiring policies because of DEI.
Okay, so this...
you get it now?
The position you have now, yes. And that
Okay,
sounds more
good.
realistic, that there might have been a hiring policy that favored some groups of people that weren't white over the
Right.
white ones
Right.
to cause them to get hired when it might have been in a blind trial the white people would have been hired otherwise. Yes.
Right.
Do you understand that that's significantly different than you saying the RAF had a policy of not hiring straight white pilots? First of all, I don't know what straight had to do with... Are you bi? Do you get like a special application on the...
Well, I'm sure you'd want to know the answer to that question, but
Well, I wouldn't because I would never become British. Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
But
So I think I've just... Look, this is why I brought it up, because the idea of a conversation is good faith, but if you question anything that I bring up that you don't know anything about, and then say, well, I don't believe that this happened, and I present you evidence that it did happen, and then you still continue to deny it, I don't see how we can have an actual debate. Now, I never said the RAF hires 0 white pilots. What I said is the policy of discriminating against white men, which has been rife in the rest of society, has created the situation where a lot of people rightly, understandably at least, feel antagonistic about it. That was one of the biggest threats with wokeness, and that is one of the biggest challenges where we are. All your points about Trump and all the rest of it, I don't see how it's relevant, and I think we're going to have a section on Trump coming up. I made the point, I think, about trans, that I think trans, I mean, the insanity of some of the things we've been asked to believe, which is like, you know, if you say you're a woman, you automatically become a woman. I think people rightly balk against that because it's ridiculous. Doesn't mean it's the #1 issue. I've never said it's the #1 issue. In fact, I pointed out it's quite a minor issue in terms of the number of people affected by it. But
I'm just curious, in terms of your shows, of all the social issues you talk about, do you think that the trans stuff is at the top 3?
Well, I don't think we've talked about trans for like a year and a half, maybe 1 or 2 episodes in a year and a half.
Okay,
2
do you feel
years.
like for conservatives in general in the United States, do you think that trans is one of the top issues that they talk about. On all the reform stuff that I looked at, trans was listed on a ton of it. It was in the manifesto.
I'm not a Republican conservative in America, so I don't know what they talk about. It's up to them.
Well, who would you have voted for in the last American election?
Who would I have voted for? Donald Trump, for sure.
Okay, so I don't know. Okay.
Doesn't mean that you're a conservative Republican.
Of course it does. Definitionally so. You're voting for the conservative Republican candidate.
So if you present me with a small pile of shit and a big pile of shit, and I pick the small pile of shit, you go, oh, you love shit. No.
If the vote is between a guy who resembles the furthest right you can be insofar as how they conceptualize the government
and a guy who has no brain, yeah, I'll go with the guy with a brain.
So
yeah.
Kamala Harris, the person who is a DA in California.
Some people might think this is a hot take. It really shouldn't be. I would go with somebody who doesn't have a brain over Hitler. I don't know about you guys. Somebody who is like, has a brain to actively try to do damage to the country versus someone who's a fucking vegetable who is like impotent, won't do any damage. Why do we pretend like it's more sensible to vote for the person that is like actively and consciously trying to do significant damage and has the wherewithal to act on it versus someone who's just like sitting there not really doing much of anything?
California, who was Attorney General in California, who served as Vice President, who was a Senator in California, versus Donald.
And like, here's the other thing too, is like, if we, okay, obviously like saying Joe Biden doesn't have a brain is a little bit of a exaggeration. I have always been consistent on this, that, you know, even since 2020, I said that he's a little bit old, he's a little bit mentally slowed down. Doesn't mean like he's not there, just he's slower. Much in the same way, like, he's cognizant, he's aware, but if you had, like, if you gave him a multiplication test and he gave me a multiplication test, has 100 on there, I'm going to finish faster than him. It's going to take him longer. Doesn't mean that he can't complete the test, it's just going to take him longer, right? That's just kind of a consequence of age. But if his mental acuity is so bad that we're saying it's disqualifying from being president, why didn't we see that in terms of like the policy that he put in place? Did Joe Biden like get us into a war unconstitutionally without Congress? Did Joe Biden, was he so crazy? Was his brain so fucked up that he was sending military into our streets? Was his brain so bad that it was leading to, you know, harassing US citizens on the street because he was going crazy? No, it was Donald Trump that did those things.
Trump, who brags about taking and passing 3 cognitive tests in a month.
Yeah.
The dumb person is Kamala Harris there.
Look, I just explained to you that when you make choices between things, it's not because you necessarily love the choice you're making. If you're forced to choose between 2 things, you choose the one that is the lesser evil, effectively.
Sure, I'm just curious.
I agree with a lot of Donald Trump's foreign policy.
Sure, of course you do. I know you do, because you have a conservative view on foreign policy. Over the past 5 years, so you do this thing where you're like, well, I have to choose between 2 things. When you've had this same choice...
That's what an election is. It's a choice between 2 things.
Well, not in the UK. You can vote between a lot of things. We have 2 parties in the US, but that's okay. I can always educate you on your political system. It's fine. But so my question is, of all these things that you have to choose between, at what case in the last like 5 years have you leaned to the left on and would vote for the left on versus?
That's a good question. You might have an answer to this for this stuff. I don't know.
I voted for a Liberal Democrat at the last election, and it's likely that I will again at the next one. I just told you this.
Is Liberal Democrat like a left-wing party in the UK? You have to be careful because in other countries, liberal has a different kind of definition than it does in the US. Was it Liberal Democratic Party? That's what he said. This is a Japanese party or Chinese or something? What is this? This is Japanese. What is Liberal Democrat UK? Well, Lib Dems is a political party. In some places, Lib Dem is a slur. Is a political party in the United Kingdom. Ideologically adhering to liberalism, was founded in 1988. Party is based on liberal democratic head. Okay, that's, yeah, cool. I want to know, what is its ideology? Blah, blah, blah. Young liberals. Women's wing. Liberal democratic women. Look at, Konstantin said he's against like all this DEI and stuff, but like they got... Why do you have to have a liberal democratic women's wing of the party? Why are we like discriminating, having safe spaces for different kinds of groups? Like, should all be the same group, right? It's kind of weird. We have an LGBT wing of the party? What? That's crazy. What's up with all this like DEI stuff going on? Social liberalism, political position, center to center left. Okay. So This would be a moderate liberal party, even by U.S. standards, would be like comparable to the Democratic Party in the United States. But it's just weird because I feel like Konstantin, his show doesn't, like, if you take somebody who watches his show, is it likely that they vote for the Liberal Democrats in the UK, or is it more likely that they vote for someone like Reform? His content on his channel, does it lean more, like, does it actually represent Liberal Democrat, or is it like shoe on head? Is he like a shoe on head kind of liberal? In other words, like a liberal who is constantly going to bat for the right? Konstantin, what's his show called? Trigonometry? Let's see, what does his coverage look like? Stop being so gullible. Abolish ICE immigration and cultural suicide. You know, reactionary. Finally, they admitted what? Looks like this is probably an anti-Muslim thing. I see what, like, what's the language again? I forget. Beautiful language, by the way. Like, legitimately, probably my favorite language. It rolls off the tongue. How the internet ruins young people. It's kind of neutral. Do this stop your partner cheating? If your partner's cheating on you, maybe you should just separate from your partner, to be honest with you. Stop your partner from cheating. It sounds like, you know, here's how to get your partner to stop smoking. They're cheating on you, bro. Why nothing gets done. How the civil service ruined Britain. Okay, so there's like, what, anti social services. Microplastics could be kind of more neutral. Keir Starmer's finished. So Keir Starmer isn't Keir Starmer the, what's his party? Is he part of the Liberal Democrats? Keir Starmer. Oh, he's from the Labour Party. So I think the Labour Party is a little bit to the left of that party then. It's time to stop demonizing men. So Scott Galloway, you might read this and think is like far-right reactionary manosphere kind of thing. What Scott Galloway, at least as far as I've seen, it seems like he's trying to tackle men's issues, speak to young men, but like not send them down the right-wing pipeline kind of thing. So I'm going to say that's kind of more neutral. Here's Eric Weinstein. So this is in that realm of conservative reactionary politics. How net zero destroyed Britain. So there's anti-climate change, or, you know, anti-green energy kind of stuff. They tried to cancel me, but now I'm free. London is unrecognizable. So it's like cultural reactionary shit. Jeremy Boring on Candace Owens. This is Eve. I don't know what this is. Britain is in real peril. Robert Jenrick. I joined Reform to save the country. Okay, so it seems like he's almost like a puff piece for a reactionary, anti-immigrant kind of person. How they lie and why they do it. Okay, I don't know what that means. The fall of London. Looks like it's a surveillance state kind of thing that can go either way. Why Reform has no choice. No choice but to what? There's 8 minutes. I don't want to watch that. Who is really behind this? The radicalization of America. I'm assuming this is probably going to be a reactionary thing too. The multipolar world you ordered is here. They tried to cancel me so many times. Stop caring. They ruined California. So anti-Gavin Newsom shit. The truth about Venezuela. I'm assuming this is like, oh, actually invading Venezuela and disposing the leader is actually a good thing. The problem with feminism in society. So like, yeah, I mean, his content seems like it's mostly reactionary stuff. I've got a problem with communism. With this, oh, he has Hassan Piker on. That's kind of interesting. And I'm assuming this is a not an adversarial conversation necessarily. So I mean, I'll give him credit where the credit's due there. Trump, Joe Rogan, COVID, and Islam. Our thoughts on interviewing with Dave Smith. Okay, all right. Well, we get the idea.
What about in terms of like supporting major issues? How many like left candidates, I guess, do you guys have on your show, or do you talk to or support?
As many as will come on.
Does that mean zero? Or
no.
How many? Okay, because I know, like, I know Faraj has been on a ton. I know you've done a lot of content with Goodwin.
Okay, they're not far left, right? But we've
correct.
also
they're right, yeah.
We've also
far
had
right.
the co-founder of Extinction Rebellion, who's currently in prison for blocking roads, on the show. We've had Aaron Bastani, who's the co-founder of Novara Media, a far-left news organization in this country. We've had a bunch.
You might have had these people on. It's worth asking though. What is the nature of those interviews? Is he more, when he has like these far right figures on? Is it a like a conversation where they're very much in agreement? They're kind of like patting each other on the back, when he has these, more left-wing liberal people on? Is it more of a adversarial conversation where he's challenging them more? I'm not saying that is the case. I don't want to overextend myself and just, oh, this guy seems like he might be a bad dude, so I'm just going to assume a bunch of things. But it is worth asking, right? Saying that you had these people on doesn't tell the whole story.
I mean, I could go down the list for ages if you want, if that's what you like.
I've seen like the top 10 lists of like the people that you've invited the most on are all generally
We had
right-leaning
comedian
people,
Mark Steele, who's a lefty. We had Deborah Francis White from the Guilty
I'm
Feminist
guessing
podcast.
when you say lefty for these people, they're populist lefties that think that the whole institution is rotted and they don't support actively. So the guy that you just described, is he like a Labour voter? Would he support Labour? Has he supported Labour?
Which guy? Mark Steele. He's a lifelong Labour voter.
Okay,
yeah.
Well then you get credit for that one, I guess. Okay, I haven't seen every episode of Trigonometry. I'm sorry.
Okay. Well, maybe you should stop opining about who we have on then if you haven't seen every episode of Trigonometry.
I don't think I should have.
I gotta watch every episode
of Trigonometry to have a rough idea.
Now, granted, I mean, there's a medium position in between these two things. Like, I saw Destiny do some research for this interview, but it looks like he probably didn't do enough, or he didn't research in the right areas. But also, like, you shouldn't have to watch like all of someone's content to get a sense of who they are. Like, I bet that most people, if they watch a little bit of my content, they have a very good idea of who I am and what I represent, what I stand for. I'm not trying to like be dishonest. I'm not trying to like hide anything under the rug or anything like that. Like, you have a pretty good sense of who I am. I'm never going to tell someone like, you got to watch all of the boring fucking videos that I put out there in order to, engage with, what I represent and to criticize me.
You should know who we have on the show regularly before you make a judgment.
I have a decent idea.
No, you don't. You've just demonstrated that you don't.
I haven't seen you. I demonstrate. I don't know every single person that goes on.
Right.
Like, you haven't made a Twitter video saying, "Okay, well, call me left wing now." You did make one saying, "Well, fine, I'll be right wing now." Like,
so
clearly you lean in a certain direction. Clearly, people perceive you. Why do you think everybody perceives you as being right wing then? If you're so centrist, or you?
That's a fair and a good question.
Why does everybody, on my side at least, everybody perceives you as being right wing?
Because
okay, that's not a good way to frame it.
As you've demonstrated in the course of this conversation.
In what way?
I'm about to explain if you just stop talking.
I hope you actually explain.
I will.
Okay, we'll see.
Okay. Can you be quiet while I do?
My mic is down.
Okay, good.
Stop filibustering.
So it's convenient to you in exactly the way that you've demonstrated throughout this conversation, where when I make a good point about anything, you say, you conservatives, and then you pivot to talking about Republicans in America, because it suits you, because then you can argue against things you came here prepared to argue against, instead of arguing with what I'm actually saying.
What is a point you feel like I haven't? First of all, I'm pretty sure the debate topics were related to America. Number one.
Were they?
They were. Number one. That's okay. Number two, what is a question that you feel like you've said that I accused you of being a conservative and then I pivoted and I didn't respond to your point?
Every single thing we've discussed.
Name one of them then.
Every single thing we've discussed.
So you can't
immigration.
What did I not respond to for immigration? You didn't bring up a point. You said a bunch of descriptions. You're like, well, this is true. And then that was it.
You keep talking over me, which means we're not actually having a discussion.
Because I'm asking you for an example and you're trying to filibuster.
I'm about to give you one if you just stop interrupting.
One point that I didn't respond to.
Can you just stop interrupting?
Go ahead. Give me the point.
Can you just stop interrupting?
I'm not even interrupting. I'm waiting for you to finish.
Not interrupting means when I finish.
Here's the thing here. If it's like the U.S., there's probably a record of you voting, but I don't think that there's a record of like what your vote was for specifically. We might have to just take him at his word that he voted for liberal Democrats. But it is something that I have in my mind, because I sometimes I feel like with some of these figures that they misrepresent how moderate they actually are, and they try to do it on purpose. But it'd be a lot for him to just blatantly lie about. Usually the tactic a lot of these guys will use if they're trying to be dishonest about what they represent is they'll omit information, they'll use euphemisms and whatnot, and blatantly lying, though, they usually won't commit themselves to that. But I don't know if we're going to have like any kind of actual record of who he actually voted for. Kissin has described himself as Remainer with liberal and centrist views who's only voted Lib Dem or Labor. Political self-identity, centrist liberal and politically non-binary satirist. While he has not publicly revealed his vote in the most recent 2024 UK election, he has been critical of both major parties and has discussed the rise of Reform UK in his commentary. Imagine if I'm not stick was reversed. Okay, yeah, whatever. All right. So we probably don't know, realistically. We'll have to just take his word for it.
When I say something, you...
It's possible that he is. It's possible that he is like a shoe on head type figure, where maybe they actually have views that are liberal, but like they found an audience that wants that like reactionary content, and so they cater to that, or it skews in that direction. But also, he's not very he's not shy about like his anti-immigrant. Seems like I don't know if he's mentioned it here. Yeah, anti-woke sentiments. So that makes me think like I feel like in that case, like you do have reactionary social values. What are your economic values to go along with that? Even if you say you vote for the liberal Democrats in the elections, the views that you express are leaning in a reactionary, like conservative direction, no? Like what actual positions does he take that convey like a more liberal position? The Remain stance, if we take for granted that he genuinely is in support of Remain and his political content actually makes the case for that, that would be one thing. But I wonder if you actually spend time watching his content, does a lot of his content push yeah, I mean, if a lot of his content is like immigrants bad, wokeism bad, if he just says that he's a Remainer and he supports Remain, but all of his content would push his audience in the opposite direction anyways, though, right?
You don't talk after that. Can
Ever?
you do that now?
Okay. Can I forget? Okay, go ahead.
There you go. On every single thing that we've discussed, immigration, national identity...
Just one thing. You're not having a conversation. I guess I didn't expect you to check out this early, but I'm asking, is there a single point that you feel like I haven't responded to with substance, and you're saying everything because you realize you don't have an answer for that?
If you want to have this conversation by yourself, you're welcome to. But
I feel like I am.
You are, yeah.
I know I am. Yes, I know I am. I feel that way. Yes.
Yeah.
I'm speaking to the copy-pasted talking points, and I can't get an actual answer out of you for anything. I can give you better answers if you're looking for them. Yeah. It's crazy to me that you guys cry about wokeism and snowflakes and all this stuff so much, but like, you guys do it all the time. You made the claim that I'm avoiding answering any of your arguments because I'm calling you a conservative. I think you are a conservative and I labels you as such, but I'm not dodging your arguments. There's not a point you brought up that I refused to address. That's why I asked you for an example of one, and you weren't able to give one. And that's fine if you're not able to give one, but then don't continue to filibuster and make...
How do you argue, by the way, that you're not conservative when like a lot of your rhetoric is about how you don't want the culture of the country to change and you don't want the demographics? Isn't that like the definition of conservatism?
The claim to say, okay, well, I guess maybe
you would support Donald Trump. Like, what?
Point that I'm
How are you not a
like
conservative?
to address. That would be the time where you would say, here's a thing that I brought up. You pivoted and you didn't address that particular thing. That would be a thing you could do if I was actually dodging and pivoting from all your points.
I can't hit this freaking bird.
I can't hear any of you. You're going to have to shout louder. Russian agent. What does that mean?
Is that from the audience?
So you're saying that because I'm from Russia and I have opinions you don't like, I'm a Russian agent?
Why are we debating the crowd right now? I'm still here.
Is that what
can
you're
you not
saying?
have can you really not answer my questions that much?
It's just not very clear. Is that what you're saying?
Let's not yell out questions from the audience. Let's not get into that. Let's try to let the dialectic get back on track here.
Simple question. What do you feel like I haven't addressed?
Every single thing that we've discussed.
Okay, let's run it down. So you said I didn't address immigration, right? My point on immigration is that you guys have fear-mongered about immigration, and every single policy that you've tried to enact has failed.
Every time you say you guys, you've already lost the argument because you're not arguing with me.
Okay, well, I asked you for a clear stance on whether or not you thought
I was
Brexit
very
was
clear
good
on
on net.
immigration.
You literally said you would not answer the Brexit question. When I asked if you were God, you could push a button. You literally said, well, I don't know. I couldn't do that.
I said immigration. Immigration, not
that's-
Brexit, immigration.
Sure. Well, Brexit was a part of the immigration argument, right?
Not for me.
For the majority of the... Oh, my God. I'm sorry. It's okay. What question did you even pose to me with regards to immigration that you felt like I didn't answer? I don't think you even posed a question to me.
What you failed to do, we started this bit of the just listen, okay? Just put the
I'm
microphone
listening right
down and
now.
listen.
I'm listening.
Just put the microphone down for a moment and listen.
I'm going to hold it right here.
Now you carry on. I'm not going to talk if you keep interrupting me. I'm not interested in
I'm
this,
not interrupting
whatever
you.
this is. You are.
I'm literally not. I'm asking you a question. You just refuse to answer. This is the game. How did I do it again? I'm asking you a clear question. You can't give me an answer.
I'll be honest, I don't think this has been the best debate for Destiny, but right now this also isn't the best debate for Konstantin either.
I'm not going to talk to you unless you listen to what I'm saying as well as me listening to what you're saying.
I am listening.
Okay, good. So we started this bit of the conversation, right? Talking about the exchange that we just had. That's what we were talking about, right? And you made your points, and I tried to make my points, and you keep interrupting and talking over me, right? I've addressed immigration, and I've addressed every single other thing that you
Notice
brought
he's
up.
not answering the
and
question,
the moment
right?
I do, what you do is you say, well, you conservatives say this, you conservatives say that, in order that you can then argue with things that I haven't said. And that is exactly what you've done throughout this whole thing. So when you ask me, why do people say that you're a conservative? It's because it's much more convenient for them than addressing the arguments that I'm actually making. And you've demonstrated that throughout this entire
What was the
discussion.
question again?
That answers your question.
Okay, what is the argument that you're making with specificity to immigration? What does Konstantin's ideal immigration policy for Great Britain look like? And who in
That's
the
a very
past
good
have
question.
you supported their vision for immigration to the United Kingdom?
Sorry, because I jumped in, which I
have you,
shouldn't have
because
done.
you
Second
interrupted
part.
me. Okay.
Second part.
Yeah. No, who have you supported historically over the past 10 years? Whose idea for immigration, I guess, have you supported policy-wise, politician-wise? Who would you support right now? What is your ideal vision for immigration to the United Kingdom?
Yeah, it's a very good question. So my ideal vision for immigration in this country would be something like probably 40 to 50,000 people a year, highly selective, which means that you really have to qualify in terms of your skill set, ticking all sorts
Oh
of
my
other
God, that guy
cultural
ran into the wall.
compatibility, age, and so all sorts of other things that basically mean you're likely to be a very positive net contribution to the country. You're probably going to have the ability to earn and pay more tax than you receive in benefits over your lifetime. You're unlikely to commit crime. You're unlikely to become a terrorist. You're unlikely to do things that we wouldn't want you to do. You would be highly selective. I think I would definitely prioritize immigration from people, from countries, not from countries really, but from people who already speak the language, who maybe have a cultural familiarity. So Hong Kongers are a good example of this, right? These are people who are formerly part of the British Empire, speak the language, they're able to come over, integrate very easily, and make a good contribution. So something like 40 to 50,000 people a year. But again, you know, it's a democratic thing. So if the British people vote to have zero immigration, that's their right. If the British people want to have 300,000 people come a year, that's their right. Part of the problem we've had with immigration in this country...
Wait, can I ask just real
No,
quick?
no, just let me just finish this
Okay.
bit and then you can ask whatever you want. A part of the problem we've had with immigration in the last 30 years is despite the fact that people keep voting
second.
against mass immigration of the kind that we've had, they keep voting for parties that promise to reduce it in 2010, in 2015, in 2016, in 2017, in 2019, and in 2024. In all of those elections, immigration was a major issue, and the British people overwhelmingly voted against what we have today. Despite that fact, we've actually had the opposite of what they voted for. So I want managed, highly selective, low numbers, high compatibility, and I want it to be in line with the democratic wishes of the British people.
Okay, so then a statement and then a question. So I would argue that the reason why people have voted for lower immigration and they haven't gotten the lower immigration is because I don't think people tend to vote for higher or lower immigration. I think that people vote for where they feel problems are, and I feel like people sometimes scapegoat immigrants as a class of people for why these problems exist. So if housing is high, you vote for less immigrants, or if the job market...
You know, this is worth saying. I think this is true in the United States as well, is that Republicans have basically convinced their voters that like all of the problems in the United States can be traced back to immigration or demographic change. And one of the issues with that is that you really can't solve those issues through immigration or demographic change, because those were never actually like the root causes of those issues. And so Republican voters will always be kind of like dissatisfied. Even if you kicked out all the immigrants, if you, I don't know, whatever, their wages will still be low. Their housing costs will still be high. Well, we're still going to have like pollution. We're still going to have, you know, progressivism, which they don't like. Like, people are still going to vote in ways that they don't like, because they've been made to believe that they are getting outvoted and people are voting for candidates and policies that they don't like because of voter fraud with illegals voting. That's not true. They think housing costs are really high and the cost of living is really high because of immigrants. The effect that immigrants have on housing is marginal. It's not because of immigrants. It's mostly because of like older people holding on to homes in a way that is unprecedented. We never had it like that in the past because people would die earlier. We treat real estate in the United States as a primary like investment vehicle. And so you have like contravailing interests there. You have, on the one hand, people who want the property to increase in value because like their equity is tied up into it. And they use it as like a leveraging thing to get loans and whatnot. And they use it as an investment. They want the property values to increase. And so that comes into conflict with the idea that you want property values to decrease so that it's cheaper for like younger people or people who are looking for a home. So you're not going to solve it through immigration. The wages are stagnant. It's not because of immigrants. It's because like in a lot of states, like they won't raise the minimum wage. Of course, there is something called an equilibrium wage. You can't just raise the wage to $100 an hour for everybody. It doesn't work that way, right? But like realistically, that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about trying to keep up with like the rate of inflation and the cost of living. That's not happening. And it's not because of immigrants. Immigrants don't compete with US citizens for the, like in some areas, in some marginal cases, yes, but on the whole, as a net, like countrywide, system-wide, it's not because of the immigrants. It's because American citizens just do not get paid. Like their pay doesn't increase with the cost of living as it should. And because in our country, I'm not one of those people that thinks like you can describe the whole problem by like, oh, rich people at the top are taking everything. I think it's something more in the middle, but it is the case, yes, that companies, rich people in the United States, CEOs make a disproportionate amount. Profit margins for these companies are probably higher than they've ever been in human history, and like it doesn't really reflect in the wages. So Republicans aren't going to solve it there through immigration. The cultural change of the United States is not driven by immigration. Immigrants tend to be conservative when they come over here, and frankly speaking, a lot of them live below the radar, and their population size just isn't big enough. The dominant cultural forces in the United States are mainly US citizens. If conservatives don't like the direction that the culture is going, that's because our country is a free country that allows people to have free speech and to associate as they want to and to express the ideas and stuff that they want to. It's not because of immigrants. It's because of native-born US citizens who are liberal or progressive. It's because of people like me. I am the enemy of the conservatives. And getting rid of the immigrants isn't going to get rid of me. I'm still here. I'm born and raised here. I'm not going anywhere. And I don't agree with your guys' cultural values. So like, you're not going to solve it that way. So all these problems that conservative media, that Republican politicians push, peddle in front of like, trans issues, right? The immigrants are not pushing trans issues. That's a US citizen born thing here. Not that immigrants can't be trans or anything, but like the acceptance for the normalization, the prevalence of trans individuals is probably going to come from US born, native born American citizens living here. The stuff that conservative media pushes out there to fearmonger and to get their audience riled up around is not going to be solved by all of this focus on immigrants. Immigrants are used as a scapegoat. It's used as like a shiny object to dangle in front of a bunch of fish to get the fish to all swim in the same direction that you want them to swim in. And realistically, the actual constituency of the Republican Party are the rich and the wealthy donors class of their party. The poor middle class working part of their party is like, they're like fuel for that fire. They're like human bodies that they need in order to push that machine forward. But the head of the machine are like the wealthy class, some of these like evangelical, conservative Christian leaders, super church owners, the Heritage Foundation, people like this, right? So it's not going to be solved through immigration. And it's a good point to kind of bring up. Like, even in the UK, pushing all like this reform shit and this Brexit shit, like, it's never actually going to solve the legitimate issues of the people, their constituency that they serve. It's boogeyman's not the right word. It's a false hope, I guess, that they keep selling these people, and they'll keep selling them, and people become more desperate. Like in the United States, they become even more radicalized, even more desperate, because they don't let go of that rhetoric. They can't let go of that rhetoric, but that rhetoric never winds up solving the issues in their lives. And so they only become, because they think that the answer is immigration, they've been convinced of it, they're only going to become more desperate and more extreme as they realize, as it, continues to not solve their actual issues and problems, and they're still depressed, and they're still, struggling to make ends meet, and their kids are still becoming more liberal and progressive, and people are still not attending church like they used to anymore, and all these other things.
Market is bad, you vote for less immigrants. Or if the NHS wait times are too high, you vote for less immigrants. Or if Brexit is losing too much sovereignty, whatever, you vote for less immigrants. I feel like when it comes to these issues, the immigrants become this catch-all scapegoat, which I'm not even saying, and again, you can label me however you want, but like, I'm not a woke person when it comes to immigration. I don't think there's anything wrong with being selective against certain groups of people. But I think that the reason why there's such this pressure for the government, the majority government, to have more immigrants come in is because they know that as much as people might feel a certain type of way about certain types of immigrants, that the collapse of the NHS or the collapse of the education system or the collapse of the local economy is going to be worse than allowing more people to come in and work those jobs. So I guess my question is, and I'm pushing with a degree of specificity because you speak about these issues a lot. When you say selecting for certain values, like what is it? What would that test even look like? When you say selecting for certain values, what are the values that you're selecting for? Number one, and then number two, you mentioned like they have to speak the language and it should be like highly skilled people that can contribute net tax positives to the economy. Let's assume that you met the threshold for all of these things. Why cap it at 30 or 40,000? If they can integrate perfectly, if they speak the language, why not have like 100 or 200 or 300,000 of these people coming in?
It's a very good question. For me, I am less attached to the numbers. I just think we're...
Oh, question in the chat from Justin, AD74. How do you know that it's not true, though? There's a valid concern surrounding no voter ID. Well, the reason that we know that it's not true is because the Republicans have been pushing this narrative for decades, literal decades now at this point, and they have consistently failed to produce any evidence of this. When you are pushing a narrative that you're telling people is true, you're not saying like, oh, it might be true. You're telling people that there is voter fraud from immigrants, and you are not providing any evidence. It's because you're a fucking liar. Here's the other reason why we know it's not true. In 2020 election that Donald Trump and the Republican Party told people was stolen from them, they did not produce any evidence for. They called for recounts and audits of multiple elections. How many did they have? They have like 11 of them. I know that you might have forgotten because like they dangled it in front of you and you weren't paying attention, but did you notice that they wanted audits, they wanted recounts? Did you ever ask, like, do you ever follow up to figure out if that ever happened or what the results of that was? Because you know what happened is they never found this mass voter fraud from immigrants like they said that they were going to find. They had audits, they had recounts, and they still didn't find it. At some point, you got to look at people who are constantly saying these things, never producing any evidence. Even when they try to look for it, they don't find it. And they still keep saying it as if they know it's true. And you got to realize at some point that they're lying to you. At some point, you got to realize that they're taking advantage of you and they're lying to you. Believe it or not, a lot of the country votes liberal or progressive because they actually hold those values. That might be an incredibly hard pill for you to swallow. By the way, like immigrants don't have like a super progressive culture. They're coming from third world countries where they have high religiosity and a conservative mindset. You think like an immigrant coming from fucking Mexico is going to be like, oh, I love trans kids and I love LGBT stuff and I think women should be on the same tier as men. No, of course not. This is bullshit. Conservatives, Republicans have had a lot of opportunities to present evidence for this. They have recounts, they have audits, they never produce the evidence. At some point, you got to realize that they're actually just lying to you. At some point, you got to stop coping and realize that it's just a lie.
At the moment is that's what the British people would want. For me, it's the numbers are. You know, Joseph Stalin said quantity has a quality all of its own, and I think there's a truth to that, which is.
I think another way that you know they're lying too is if you look at the past, like, what, 2 or 3 decades of conservative politics, they've been trying to push gerrymandering. If they really care about fair elections that are secure and everything, and it's not just that they're trying to manipulate people and they're trying to get as much power as possible, then why have they had such a strong project in the last 30 years of trying to gerrymander the fuck out of our country? At some point, you got to be honest with yourself and just realize that these people are power-hungry manipulators, and it shows in like everything that they do. It shows in their rhetoric. It shows in their behavior. It shows in how they themselves try to run elections. By the way, when it comes to voter ID, like, there have been opportunities to provide to actually, like, liberals have actually stepped forward. There's a Tellerico conversation on this. Let's just look it up. He'll say it better than I ever will. There's been a few times, or at least one time that I know of, that Democrats actually offered to do a voter ID bill with Republicans, but I think that it required those voter IDs to be, like, supplied by the government, so it's not a poll tax. That's reasonable, right? Why did Republicans shoot it down? Because it's not real. Tellerico voter ID. And, like, here's a compromise that I bet you most liberals, most Democrats would be willing to compromise on. We'll give you voter ID if the voter ID is free at the point of service. I mean, the government's not going to charge you for it. It's your constitutional right to vote, so that ID has to be given to you for free. Okay? You need to have enough facilities in your district or whatever it may be to actually process the volume of people needing those voter IDs. And you also have to agree that we're going to end gerrymander. We're going to have nonpartisan districting commissions in every state. I guarantee you that if you put that on the table, Republicans will not vote for it. There's a interview that he did. He got voter ID, and they ended the segment. Was it this one? I thought it was this one, but this one has a different title.
I'll start here. Partisan divisions and exclusive goals. Another issue that a lot of Texans are wondering about is the cost of living. More building, we could. Your primary opponent, Representative.
I first got elected to the state house by flipping a Trump to.
And if voters do give you 6 years
down costs because things like gerrymandering and past term limits, I think that we could finally thanks for people out of the American dream. Of prescription drugs, of higher education, all of these rising costs that are locking people out of the American dream.
U.S. Senate candidate James Tallarico.
Now that I look for it, I'm not going to find it. But anyways, you get the idea. I pretty much laid out what it is.
Once you have very large numbers of people coming over a short period of time, it is disruptive for the reasons we've already discussed. And it also can put pressure on infrastructure. The reason, by the way, we haven't had the policy on mass immigration that the British people voted for isn't that. I mean, I agree with you. Of course, there are some people who scapegoat immigrants to explain the problems that society has. And I don't agree with scapegoating immigrants. That doesn't mean...
Well, it kind of seems that's what his coverage does now.
Necessarily good. One of the problems with mass immigration
is it necessarily bad?
It's been used in Europe to cover up the fact that our economies are not growing. Our economies are shrinking on a per capita basis. We are poorer per capita in this country today than we were before the financial crisis. And the reason we haven't had the policy of controlled immigration that people keep voting for is that bringing in more bodies is the only way politicians can pretend our economy is still growing. That's actually the main reason that this has been happening.
Okay, so again, so I guess my question is, what are the values, or what are the things that you would select for when you talk about like a values-based test for people coming to the country? Like, what are the things that you're talking about? And then also just a comment on, the reason why we're bringing in immigrants is to shore up an economy. I think a lot of that has to do with the boomer generation as well, that you had a lot of people come back from wars, or stay from wars, I guess for your guys' case, but in the United States we say come back. And then you had this aging population that had a ton of kids, and now these people have all hit a certain age, so you're kind of at this weird demographic age thing, which is why they're bringing in a bunch of younger workers now to kind of fix that issue, because you've got a lot of benefits and your triple lock pension, whatever else, all these things, Social Security in the United States. Yeah.
Well, that's part of it, but the problem is if you're bringing people who are net consumers of tax revenue, then you're not solving that problem, you're making it worse, right? And that's what's been happening in the UK. So when you have mass unskilled or very low-skilled immigration and plus lots of dependents, you're actually bringing in people who are then going on benefits in this country, which I have no idea why it is in this country that we allow foreign citizens to receive benefits. It doesn't make any sense to me. But what happens is you then effectively are bringing net consumers of tax revenues, and you're making that problem worse, which is why I say it isn't that. It's the fact that politicians are able to pretend that we are growing. I mean, the British economy is growing by like 1.1% or whatever it is. It's still not even growing even on that basis. But the reason they bring in lots and lots of people is so that they can add to the total tax base without having consideration of what happens when you divide that by the number of people, which is you're getting poorer.
Okay, so then let's say that everything you just say is true. And I would agree that bringing in people to consume welfare, now I can't speak to the exact immigration schema that you have in the United Kingdom, but let's assume that that is happening, then why not speak to changing those policies rather than attacking the concept of like, well, 200,000 people came in and they're all leeching from the welfare? Why not just say that, if people want to try to immigrate, we'll do this. However, we're going to forbid people from qualifying for this much welfare. In the United States, you have to make a certain amount of money to qualify for visas or, long permanent resident cards, green cards, or whatever. Why don't I ever hear a conversation about that, changing the incentives?
Well, that's exactly what I advocate for all the time. That's literally what I say every time I talk about immigration.
Okay, that's good, but because I feel like I just heard you talk a lot about it, and it was just reducing the number, high skilled only, reducing the number, but having like a cap on.
The thing you just described is literally what I advocate for on a daily basis.
Okay, I hear you talk a lot about the other stuff, but maybe I've just happened to miss those things.
The thing that what I believe about immigration, one of the problems is because, for the reasons we've already discussed, when you've had this open border policy combined with, the mantra diversity is our greatest strength.
I hate that if you want to have like criticisms of immigration and it's like reasonable, like, hey, you know what, we can't have people like we have a certain amount of social services, but that should be prioritized to U.S. citizens or UK citizens in this case. And, we want to kind of prioritize immigrants who are going to, be like a net positive for the country. Okay, right? Even if you disagree with that, like that's a reasonable position to have. But then like you poison the whole well when you do like this, open borders policies and diversity. And it's like, well, okay, wait a second. We don't have open borders. Why do you have to lie and exaggerate? Why can't you like have a reasonable, honest conversation about it? Why do we have to play like these games?
You build up a lot of resentment with other people against immigrants, and the reason you see people now on the internet talking about, Britain's been colonized and Britain's been invaded.
Because of the rhetoric that right-wing media puts out.
People use it, but I don't like it. And the reason I don't like
I wondered, does he spend time in his coverage pushing back against that rhetoric? Or does he not?
it is, I don't blame people for wanting to come to Britain. Britain's great. Of course they'd want to come here. I believe that what we need to do is change policy so that the British government is doing things that are in the interest of the British people. And it's not in the interest of the British people for us to be spending £14 million a day on illegal immigrants. It's not in the interest of British people to be housing, clothing, and feeding people who've come here from other countries who are not British citizens and who are not paying tax here. We shouldn't have foreign nationals in social housing. We should not be providing benefits to foreign nationals. And I say this as someone who was very poor and a foreign national for quite a significant portion of my life in this country. So I advocate for sensible policies on immigration, on what happens when you get here. That is my position, which is why, with all respect, I'm glad a normal conversation has broken out between us, despite the conversation we were having earlier, because this is the reason I don't subscribe to political parties and this sort of team-based agenda, because every political party has lots of things about its policies that I don't like. I don't like lots of things about left and right political parties. I like to advocate for the things that I believe are positive for this country. I think a positive, carefully selected immigration policy, and then putting the interests of British people who are already here, who are nationals of this country first, is exactly what we should be doing. So
Sure.
I'm glad we agree on that.
Yeah, so I don't necessarily disagree with anything you've said, but one of the issues with the statement of, like, I don't subscribe to a certain political party, I think that you can have a I don't know, a constellation of ideas that don't map cleanly onto some side, but when it comes down to elections, or when it comes down to pushing people to vote in an election, you kind of have to choose a party, or you have to choose a person. Things have to collapse into one choice.
Sure.
And I guess, I mean, you can tell me if I'm wrong, but the feeling that I get from you, from the things that I've heard you say, is that if I were to look at the past 20 years of British politics, and if immigration was a huge issue that I had with this country, I feel like the Conservatives have failed monumentally in dealing with the immigration issue.
Of course.
I feel like
just like Labour before them. Yeah.
Sure, but I feel like the prediction was that Labour was going to continue to fail massively on it, and it seems like Labour hasn't failed. It seems like Starmer, for all of his faults, I know you guys all hate him, but it seems like his government has done a good job at cutting heavily into the amount of immigrants coming over, cutting heavily through the backlog of asylum seekers that you had that the Tories refused to deal with. But now, on the eve of all these Tories beginning to look like they're going to flip to reform, I feel like all of the people who are opposed to the mass migration or mass immigration narrative are going to try to support reform, when all of these people have seemed to fail to deliver on these reduction of immigration promises over and over and over again, and that's just very confusing to me. I don't understand that.
Yeah, well, let me explain it to you. I mean, it's a fair critique. So, first of all, the Labour, your point about, Labour parties reduce the numbers, it's not quite how it works, but yeah, the numbers are lower. They're still very high. I mean, this is why I kept bringing up the point about what was happening in this country 30 years ago when I first came here. The numbers of people coming then were about 40 to 50,000 a year. 55,000, I think, in 1996. It's still like 300-something thousand now, which is way too high, particularly given the cumulative impact of mass immigration that we've had. So both Labour and not both Labour, the Labour, the Lib Dems, and the Conservatives have all failed on this. All the mainstream politicians have failed on this for the reasons that I gave you.
Sure,
and let me address the point about reform.
Like
let me
the Labour or the Conservative Party, the Tories failed far, far, far more.
No, it started with the Blair government. So more people came under the Blair government. Let me just lay
I understand. I agree. We're going Boris wave after. It seems like the Tories failed hardcore.
They both failed in exactly the same way.
Okay, so you would say, as of right now, if you could flip a coin and have the Tories continue, okay, versus the Labour government, that they would both perform the same on immigration?
I think
I don't know everything about UK politics. I mean, I could look into this. I don't really want to right now. But I just feel like, especially in the United States, I feel like we've wasted the past 10 years obsessed with immigration. When I think per the numbers, per like actually how it's affecting society, I don't even think it's like a top 10 issue. And the thing that's most frustrating to me is how we could have spent time actually doing things like investing in our infrastructure, updating it, dealing with climate change, not to be like a tree hugger or anything, but there's a way to deal with climate change that's like smart, intelligent. It's transitional. You do things like you try to put in nuclear generators all over the fucking country. That's not only just from like a green energy standpoint, but also just frankly speaking from like the cost of energy kind of thing for the long term, energy capacity, because gasoline isn't an infinite resource because we're burning through it very quickly. To have like that kind of capacity is really good. We could have done things like that. A lot of people aren't aware that we're living through the 6th mass extinction event in human history. I think people, when they think of mass extinction events, they think it's like one catastrophic event, like a volcano erupts and everybody dies, or a meteor hits the earth and everybody dies. But reality is these things happening over like geological timescales. But we are living through one of those periods where we're seeing biodiversity kind of decline. We're seeing like the collapse of like the food chain in marine life because we do overfishing. Like, these are things that we could deal with. It's not like, oh, we need to stop fishing and nobody keep fish anymore. But it's like, okay, we know that's an issue. Is there a way for us to tackle that where we're getting nations together to put some kind of agreement on reducing maybe how much fishing we're doing. Maybe we require people to offset their fishing of marine animals by doing like fisheries to replenish it, much in the same way that if you're going to chop down trees for Christmas trees, you're also going to plant them, and then it becomes a point where you plant enough trees that it's like net zero. You're chopping down as many as you're putting up, kind of thing. So we could have dealt with that. We could deal with like universal health care, the mental health issues that we have in the United States. We've had like AI is a thing that we know has been coming down the pipeline for decades now, but we never really actually had an honest, genuine conversation about it. If we could have spent like a lot of that time that we spent the past 10 years just bitching and complaining about immigrants nonstop, having robust conversations about how to actually regulate AI, what does it actually look like, what does that policy potentially look at? Like, we could have done a lot of things, and we just waste so much time on a fake issue.
Probably very likely similar. Yeah, absolutely.
How would we feel that way? What's the evidence of that?
Sorry?
Why would we feel that way? What would we look to in reality that would inform that?
I think the numbers were going to come down, whoever was in charge. I don't think the numbers this year have come down because the Labour government has come in. I think they were likely to come down anyway. My point is something else. Immigration under both governments is way too high, particularly given its cumulative impact over time. But your point about a few Tories defecting to reform, it's not all these Tories. It's like 3 or 4 people in terms of the MPs. They were all people who would have been pretty hawkish about immigration, and when they were in power, tried to do something about it and were prevented from doing anything about it by their own party, which is why they're now moving to reform. So yeah, I voted. I think I voted for the party I voted most for in my life are the Liberal Democrats. Second most would be Labour. I think I might have voted. Yeah, I think I voted Conservative once, and yeah, I've never voted Reform. So.
Okay, I guess when I look at, here's a question, I guess, when it comes to the immigration thing. Let's say that for the next 5 years, we could float this idea of capping immigration at 30 or 40,000 per year to the UK, but it would mean, I won't say severe, but somewhat of a degradation or continued degradation of the services that the NHS provides, and then an increase in the cost of education, that the costs are going to continue to go up, but we can cut the amount of immigrants coming in as a result of that. Do you think that's a trade? Is it a trade that you would support, and do you think it's a trade that most British people would support?
I definitely think it's a trade that most British people would support, but I also don't think that that is actually what would happen. I mean, first of all, given the decline in birth rates that we are now seeing, schools are shutting anyway, so you don't need foreign teachers to teach British children. That's not really happening. In terms of
foreign students for money, right?
Hold on, but you mean for universities?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, foreign students are coming in and paying fees and then going back to their country. I think it's totally fine. I've got no problem with that. We're exporting a British service. No issue with that at all. But in terms of the NHS, I do think it would have a short-term impact on the NHS, but we have to train British people to do those jobs, inevitably so. And that short-term impact will be disruptive, but it will be worth it. But my broader point to you about mass immigration beyond specific shortages and specific industries, which, by the way, are exaggerated. You've got to remember, right, in what is effectively a market economy, when you have a shortage of labor, what that does is increases the wages that people are willing to offer people to do those jobs, and that then creates more people who come in and do those jobs. So
but it also increases the cost of those services,
yeah,
right?
of course, but because British people are being paid properly to do those jobs, to me, that's a trade-off that's perfectly worth it.
The cost will ultimately rise more than there will be a concentrated industry that might be paid a little bit better, but the cost overall of the things
but
like the NHS
wages for British people will go up, which will help them to be able to afford other things that they want, right? I am perfectly happy for British NHS staff and doctors to be paid better. Wouldn't you agree with that?
Well, I think the question would be, is it worth the trade-off of a degradation of NHS services? Which is
I don't know that it would lead to long-term. I think short-term, of course, it would be disruptive. I don't think long-term it would lead to a degradation of NHS services at all. You would have a highly paid workforce of British people who are trained in this country to be doctors and nurses. I think that would be incredible, and that's what we should be aiming for. But the broader point I'm making to you is take the NHS and other shortages that you might create in this way out of it. The bulk of the people who've come over the last 30 years are not supporting themselves financially to the point where it's worth our time bringing them in, and that's the problem.
Even the bulk of
Well, it's worth asking too, though. They may not be, but is that true of their children? Like the second generation of children who are born to immigrant parents, is that also the case for them, or do they wind up becoming more like net tax contributors? Interesting thing for you to know about the United States. I think it's like, what, 41% of the U.S. citizens don't pay net taxes? What percent of U.S. citizens pay net taxes? Remember to file your taxes, guy. It's tax season. Actually, when is the cutoff? I forget. What is it, March or April? Tax filing cutoff. April 15th. Okay, remember, you guys, you got to pay your taxes April 15th. Based on 2020 data, approximately 31.4% of tax filers owed no federal individual income tax due to credits, deductions, and low income. However, this figure is higher during pandemic effective years. Okay, so I probably remember during pandemic years. But still, that's almost like a third of the U.S. population is not paying net taxes. You might look at something like this and wonder, like, oh, how can the system sustain that? Well, reality is that these people are, it sounds weird, but like, what is an economy? What is commerce? What does money even represent? I think I recently had my understanding, and hold on, definition matters. The 47% figure often cited refers specifically to federal income tax. Oh, but that's what I was, okay, that's what I was referring to. But total tax liability. Okay, I wasn't aware of this, but this is this is a more complete number. So only 47% or 47% don't pay federal taxes, but 31.4% don't pay net taxes overall. So almost a third. Like, what is money? I think I've come to a better understanding of money at this point, and I'm not an expert on economics, so maybe that'll evolve over time. Maybe somebody will come along and correct me. But my understanding of money is like, it's like a placeholder for future productivity. You trade your time for productivity with your job, and your job pays you basically like the value of the productivity that you're producing for them, so to speak. And then the money that you hold is like like money by itself. There's a nice quote that's like you can't eat money. You know what I mean? Like, money itself is not valuable. It's what can you do with the money. Some people will say like money isn't valuable intrinsically. It's like the confidence you have in it. That's part of it too, of course. But it's like, it's what you buy with the money. Clothes, food, video games, TVs, vacations, travel time, travel to other countries, stuff like that. So the money itself, while it's sitting there not being used, what is it? It's nothing. It's not doing anything. It's a placeholder, almost like a guarantee of some future productivity. You're going to use it to purchase somebody else's productivity. You want to buy, I don't know, you want to buy a piece of bread. Well, the bakery is trading their productivity for money. You're giving them that money. So you're holding on to, I don't know, $10, $15, whatever. While you're holding on to it, you're holding on to a placeholder for future productivity. You take it over to that bakery, and now that bakery, now you're actualizing that productivity by exchanging it for the productivity that they produce in the form of using their equipment, using their time to produce bread or whatever it may be. They have that money now. Now they go and they want to buy, I don't know what the fuck a bakery machine is. I don't know what they use. I don't know anything about that. They buy the Super Bread Maker 5000, or they want to buy it, but they got to save up for it. So while they're saving up to buy that new piece of equipment, they're saving up a placeholder for future productivity. And so then they go, eventually they have enough saved up to buy that Super Bread Maker 5000. And now they're trading it to the company that produces the Super Bread Maker 5000. And that company, the productivity that they provide is they have machiners, they have engineers who are exchanging their time for money to design this equipment, so on and so forth. So you get the idea. Like all of society is trading time, trading productivity for placeholders so they could exchange it for some other productivity or time elsewhere. So with that in mind, even though you have like 1/3 of the US population that isn't paying net taxes, what's going on there is you're taking resources, you're taking productivity elsewhere in the economy, and you're shifting it over to subsidize this portion of the economy, which are essential, by the way. If you lost 1/3 of your economy, you're losing what? You're losing like your teachers, you're losing your janitors, you're losing, I don't know who else isn't necessarily paying net taxes. You're using like grocery shop workers. You're losing the people who work at the bakeries. People are on the lower end of the economic spectrum, but they're necessary, because I might go to a job and work a job that pays a higher rate, but I don't have fucking time. I work a job. I don't have time to fucking bake my own bread. I don't have time to farm my own carrots and livestock pigs and clean up after them, or you butcher the pigs, or sit there and machine I don't know, the rims on a vehicle that I buy, right? So we need those people in the society. All of it is people exchanging time and productivity. And so that money that gets redistributed elsewhere in the economy to this lower end of the economic spectrum that isn't paying net taxes, that money is going to them. It doesn't get burned, doesn't get evaporated. They wind up spending it elsewhere, which generates productivity elsewhere in the economy. They spend that money on food, on bread, on rims for their car, whatever it may be. And that goes into businesses who they are now getting money. And they, from that money, is an indicator to them that they need to produce. And so now the economy is producing, it's moving. People are making things, people are doing things. And that produces a strong economy. Obviously, it's more complicated than that. I just, it's just a way of kind of looking at the way economics works, I guess.
The bulk of the wave of low-skilled and no-skilled immigration and dependence that we have had is not economically beneficial to us. We should be welcoming people in who are economically beneficial, and as part of the wave that we've had over the last 30 years, some of those people have been economically beneficial. Great, let's bring those people in, but let's not bring in hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people who are net takers of tax revenue and also are more likely to be doing other things that we don't want.
So
let's do final thoughts.
Just a quick question. What do you think then is the incentive of a conservative government to bring in more immigrants, if not to desperately fill jobs that they feel the economy is going to be lacking?
We talked about it earlier, didn't we?
Well, yeah, but when I
to pretend the economy is growing when it's not. That's the incentive.
But if they're net takers of everything, wouldn't this would increase your debt and your deficits?
No.
I also kind of wonder too, like, would we really be for immigrants who are like this high earner, high skilled labor? Because then aren't they competing with the citizens in our country? Like, would we really be for that? In other words, like, would Konstantin be for that? I wonder sometimes when people say that. It just kind of feels like they're trying to look for excuses to be against immigration. Like, oh, I don't want low-skilled immigration because they're not the highest productive immigrants. Not true in the United States, by the way. Immigrants in the United States tend to be net contributors. But like, okay, you don't want those immigrants. Okay, so you want the high-skilled, high-labor, high-educated immigrants. Okay, but then those will wind up competing with your citizens. So like, do you actually want that, or are you just kind of picking and choosing arguments based on what's in front of you at the given time?
What happens? What happens? The way to think about it is like this. Let's say that you're a family, you've got a wife, 2 kids, right? And you have a total household income of £100,000. Okay. And your wife says, we need to grow our household income. Let's bring my parents in. Let's bring the in-laws in. They earn 20,000 a year collectively together. So you bring in, now your household income is 120,000, except you now have to divide it among 6 people instead of 4 people. That's what they've done. They are the wife that says, let's bring the in-laws in so we can pretend our household income.
So I understand the analogy, but I feel like it'd be more, you have a household of 4 people, and then there's also some kind of work that needs to be done. Maybe you need grandma to knit, maybe you need grandpa to mow the grass or something. And if you can't afford to do it, you have to hire out somebody else to do it.
Yeah, but you can't pretend you're getting richer. You're getting poorer because you now have to feed 2 more people.
Yeah, but if you didn't bring those people in, the cost for everything would be...
Yeah, also this point, but also think about it this way. Like, okay, you might think like, oh, I'm not getting richer. But grandpa mowing the lawn or whatever for you is freeing you up to do other things that are more productive uses of your time. You might be able to do more overtime at work that gets paid time and a half at a higher rate because grandpa's at home taking care of stuff that like at the home that maybe doesn't generate as much economic value in the terms of dollars, but it's freeing you up. Kind of in the same way that, like, if we have immigrants working jobs that we don't necessarily want to work, it frees us up to do more productive kinds of work.
Be so much higher than at the end of the day.
It wouldn't.
Okay. This is a mean question, but just to push, because like this is frustrating because, well, but in every single part of the world where this is tried, it is the case that bringing in even low-skilled immigration bolsters every part of your economy, with some exceptions, especially in Europe and the UK, where you have weird rules around like asylum seekers not being allowed to work for a year for whatever reason, which I think is a whole other issue to bring up. But this idea that if we just cut off immigrants, all of our native people can just work these jobs and it'll be fine. Like, I hear this rhetoric from so many people all over the world, and this has never worked anywhere ever.
Well, if bringing in 8 million people as we've done boosts your economic growth, and why aren't we growing?
Well, I think Brexit hurt quite a bit. Number one,
we're doing better than other European countries, which, by the way, have also done mass immigration. The reason
I'm
just
pointing out, your goal wouldn't be to other European countries. Your goal would be compared to where the United Kingdom could be otherwise. And I know that for all of your issues with EU immigrants from Eastern Europe or whatever, you've basically replaced all of those now with a high amount of just Indian and Pakistani immigrants, which earlier seemed like the ones you had the biggest problems with. So it seems like in terms of immigration or getting the types of labor that you would want for this country, that was pretty significantly impacted.
Brexit didn't do on immigration what people wanted it to do.
Yeah.
It's one of the reasons I didn't vote for it, just remember.
Sure.
Yeah. Okay, should we move on?
Yeah. Let's move on to the next topic. Is Trump's approach to political issues dictatorial or reflective of democratic consensus?
Yeah, I think, almost definitionally, Donald Trump views himself as a guy who should be able to operate the entire executive branch just through the White House. There's a number of examples of this. I mean, we can run through any of these. I'm not entirely sure what your position would be on this. I'd be surprised if it was anything different, but you can tell me. Or I can
Oh my God.
I can define more things or whatever, if that would make you comfortable first, I guess.
Well, yeah, maybe you can define dictatorial for us, actually.
Sure. So when I think of dictator, I think of single man type rule, where there's a single person who feels like they have more legitimacy. Well, I would say than the other branches of government, but essentially. So obviously examples of this are the way that Donald Trump treats his Supreme Court. I would say.
Hold on, let me
Sorry,
zero real
sorry,
fast. I'm
just
still
before-
listening,
I just
but hold
couldn't
on.
quite hear it. So
Sure.
it's a single person who feels he has more legitimacy.
More can enact power through his will alone, basically.
His will alone.
Yeah.
So he doesn't have to follow the law.
He feels like he's above the law.
He's above the law. He feels or he's acting like, somebody in the audience might feel like they're above the law, but it doesn't make them a dictator, right?
No, but it would make them dictatorial.
If someone in the audience thinks they're above the law, that would mean they're dictatorial.
Yeah, it would be a dictatorial personality. They might not be a dictator because they don't have the power to be a dictator.
Okay. And if someone is, say, the president, and they can be voted out, and they will be voted out, would they still be considered dictatorial?
Yeah, they could be dictatorial. Yeah, of course.
Even if they can be voted out?
Yes.
Really?
Yeah.
To me, a dictator is someone who just basically retains power, including by force. If you can be voted out, how can you be a...
There's a childish sense. I mean, that's one characteristic of dictatorships is they try to hold on to power, but Donald Trump also tried to cling on to power, right? He tried to overthrow the government on January 6, 2020. He talks about trying to run for a third term. He's trying to federalize the elections, seize the elections. So there is that element there. That element's already satisfied, even if you wanted to use that as your element. But no, dictatorship is broader than that. Dictatorship, really, what dictatorship is one person who has all the power, authority, and doesn't have checks and balances. We live in a republic, or we're supposed to live in a republic, where power is not concentrated. Power is checked and balanced. It's distributed through different branches of the government. They're supposed to check and balance each other. If you have a system where you want like one person to decide, for example, I want to go to war, even though the Constitution says that Congress declares war, and they decide like, oh, I'm not going to have to get the approval and consent of the legislative branch. I just get to decide for myself, even when the law says that I can't do it. And you have people that support them doing that. Those people have a dictatorial mindset where they want one person to just do everything for themselves. All power is concentrated in them. All decision making, all legislative authority is concentrated in them. They don't have a check and balance on them. That is dictatorship. It's the opposite of having a republic where power is distributed and you have like people in a representative body that are representing different elements of that country. Different, you have in a legislature, people represent this part of the country, somebody who represents this part of the country over here, and you have a body that's deliberative, meaning like you have different people that are bringing different experiences, different ideas, different interests, different opinions together to debate a topic, to bring different considerations to a topic before they make a decision. That system is a little bit slower, but it's more stable and it's less prone to corruption because it's harder when you have a bunch of different people representing different parts of the country to all get together and agree on one scheme or one idea or one form of corruption. They're able to balance each other out. And by the way, when they teach the U.S. Constitution in school, they teach it as if all the branches are co-equal branches of government. It's kind of sort of true. It's like the layman's version of the U.S. Constitution. The reality is that, and you can find quotes where the founding fathers are talking about this, the Congress was considered the prime branch, like the preeminent branch. It's checked and balanced, yes, but it's supposed to be the strongest of the three branches. Not super duper strong where the other three can't really compete with it and hold it accountable, but it is the branch that determines what the law is. It determines what the structure of our government is. The executive branch, the role of the executive branch is to execute the law. It's not to decide the law. It's not to determine what the structure of the government is. It's not to shape the government the way they want it to. It's simply to take the law that the Congress determines. The Congress is the creator that designs the system. It's to take what the Congress gives and carry out the will of Congress. That's what the role of the executive branch is.
A dictator.
Well, I mean, you have some people who will change their voting systems in order to be elected over and over
Like
again.
Putin, fair.
Sure.
So
Or
Putin
Evo
is a
Morales.
dictator,
Or,
yeah.
Sure, yeah.
But if you can be voted out in a free and fair election, then can you still be a dictator?
You could. I mean, you could nominate the next person in line to be the next king or president. I think that Donald Trump,
That's why I said free and fair election, right?
Sure, which, I mean, they're also trying to actively impede right now. But do you think that if Donald Trump was 20 years younger, he keeps making these references to running for a third term, do you think he'd try to run for a third term?
Yeah, I think the fact that he keeps referencing a third term is a disaster, and I think he should definitely stop doing it.
Yeah, I think it's dictatorial.
That's not a...
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
So
Oh, yeah, I
it's pretty
agree.
dictatorial.
A lot of people do this with this, when I've noticed in other debates Destiny has on this. Destiny will bring up this like, oh, he keeps threatening to run for a third term and seizing an election. And they'll go like, oh, yeah, I disagree with that. I don't like that. Okay, but we're talking about whether or not he is dictatorial, and whether or not, you know, dictators try to not, you know, leave office, they try to cling on to power. That's what we were just talking about here. And you're not really acknowledging that we've now satisfied that qualifier that you put up as a criteria. Instead, you're kind of sidestepping that to go, oh, well, I disagree with them doing that. That's not the point. The point is that satisfies your criteria of dictatorship. I want you to acknowledge that part. Acknowledge that.
Real guy, yeah.
I think, well, I think that, see, here's the issue with that, right? Is Trump talks a lot of shit and he likes to piss people off. And so he says these things and you kind of go, well, it's 99.999% that he's trolling.
Wait, is it?
Hold on. Just let me lay out my argument. We've established that we're actually able to have a conversation, so let's have one. So 99.999%.
You know, it could be both, right? It's not mutually exclusive. You could be trying to troll people, but you could be doing it in a way where you're trying to test the waters or normalize a given thing, or you're trolling people and you also mean it at the same time.
That's my assessment anyway. He's trolling. 0.0001%. Shit, he's talking about a third term. Not good. And I regard, particularly given what happened on January the 6th, the fact that he keeps referencing a third term as a problem, and it's something that indicates that the risk of him trying to
what mealy mouth language
is non-zero, which to me would be absolutely dictatorial. However, I do lean on the idea that it's probably just trolling. In terms of everything else he's doing domestically, what I see is
he's just trolling, just like he was on January 6th.
As intended. He is doing things. Some of them are illegal. The legal system pushes back against that. The Supreme Court, in which
would a dictator try to do things that are illegal and beyond what they actually have the authority to do?
Judges
what do you guys think?
And repeatedly deny him the opportunity to do things that he wants to do.
And his administration's been ignoring the courts.
So no, but I would also say that for the first part, I don't know where 99.99% of Trump's statements are trolling. I don't know where that comes from. I feel like
that specific statement about third term, I suspect is 99.9% trolling.
But you said earlier, it was young.
Also, you'll notice sometimes that defenders of Trump will do this thing where when you criticize Trump, they'll go like, well, you can't actually read his mind. You don't know what he's actually thinking. You don't know what he actually meant by that. But then they'll defend him by saying like, oh, well, he's trolling. Like, basically, I'm reading his mind. I know that he's not serious about this. They want to have their cake and eat it too. They want to have like both sides of that argument depending on what they need to say in order to defend Trump.
If he would run for a third term.
I didn't say that.
Oh, I thought you said you felt like it would.
No, I didn't say that.
Do you think that if he was 20 years younger, do you think he would
what
try
I'm
to
saying
run
is
for a third
I agree that him talking about a third term is a worrying thing that he should stop doing. That's
Sure.
what I agree with.
Okay, but that might be that on that issue, but then there are a load of other issues where it seems like he feels like he alone is entitled to make these decisions that nobody else ought to have any oversight over. So, for instance, this idea that the president has usurped from the Congress the ability to do tariffs and worldwide economic policy is
declare war.
Thing. You can levy tariffs across every other country in the world.
To commit the United States to war.
Checked him a bit on that power. Now he says he's going to go elsewhere and try to do the exact same thing. So it seems like we're just going to have a back and forth on this, maybe until he's out of office.
To declare war, it's not a suggestion. It's in the Constitution, Article 1, Section 8, Clause 11. Congress has the authority. Congress and Congress alone is given the authority to declare war and to fund war.
Office.
Sorry to interrupt, but just I think this is worth double clicking on. That's why I said that is the system working as intended. So American democracy is robust and strong because when the president tries to do things he's not allowed to do by law, the legal system prevents him from doing that. Right?
No. So I think that the American system is strongest when everybody is trying to act in good faith within the bounds of the system. I don't think continuously.
When was the last time that happened?
Joe Biden. I mean, if you want, we can run a whole host of issues. So I would look at like the weaponization of the Department of Justice by Donald Trump. I think is a historically crazy thing by a U.S. president. If you want to give me any examples that you feel would stack up to that between Biden, Obama, and the Clintons.
What kind of argument is this anyways? It's such a stupid argument. Like, yeah, dictators try to take, you know, if they're in a democracy or a republic or another system of government, that is what dictators do, is they try to break the boundaries that are supposed to keep them in check.
For the past 34 years.
I didn't say that Donald Trump is not doing things that shouldn't be challenged legally. What I said is I think it's the part of the American system that all these different branches compete for power in the.
It's not part of. No, this isn't even true either, right? The concept isn't that the different branches compete for power. The concept is they're supposed to try to stay within the limits of what their power is. We don't want them constantly trying to break the limits of their power. The checks and balances are there to try to keep them from breaking the limits of their power. But it's not like, oh, we put checks and balances there, therefore go ahead and try to break all the fucking laws and break all the limits on your power as possible. No, you're supposed to try to obey the powers that you have. It's not like, oh, here's an open invitation for you guys to try to be as corrupt as possible, and that's supposed to be the way that things should go. No, you're not supposed to. We don't design the system with the intention that everybody's trying to break the law all the time. We design the system like, we hope that you don't. We try to make sure that you don't. We try to put limits on your powers to make sure that you don't. But in the event that you do, because we know that there are people that are corrupt out there, we also try to put systems in place to try to check and balance that. that doesn't mean like it's a good thing or that it's normal, or that it's okay that you're actually trying to extend your power beyond what it's supposed to be.
And that is an ongoing process that has been going on for 250 years. There's definitely criticism that you can make about Trump. I think there's plenty of criticisms that people...
This shit's so stupid. It's like, oh, Congress wants to plot to assassinate the president. Oh, well, that's just them trying to exercise as much power as they can, and that's just the way the system works. The judicial branch is taking money, taking bribes from, different moneyed interests explicitly. We have an email here where they show like, oh, if you give me this amount of money, I'm going to roll in your favor. Oh, that's just the way the system works. That's the way the system's supposed to work. They're just trying to extend their power. No, this is stupid, right? We only make the excuse for Donald Trump and the Republican Party because they're a bunch of toddlers and we don't think that they have personal responsibility.
I don't think American democracy is a threat because the system is working as intended. And if he was truly dictatorial, the signal for me of a president being dictatorial is when they override the checks and balances that exist and begin to effectively break the system. I don't think that's happening.
I mean, Konstantin just acknowledged that he's doing that. Konstantin's argument is that he is trying to do that. He keeps doing that, but there's checks and balances in place that are like trying to rein him in from doing that. Well, all that means is that he is trying to be a dictator as much as possible. And that's pretty much how every dictatorship forms in history, is they try to get away with what they can get away with. And then they test the perimeters of the fence, almost like a lion at a zoo. Or the raptors in Jurassic Park. They're testing for weaknesses. And when they find the weakness, they're going to exploit it. And once they break through that weakness, they're starting to break through those checks and balances they're supposed to keep them in place. And at that point, now the dictatorship does start to, take over the system. That's not a good thing. That's not normal. That's not how it's supposed to go.
But he's been doing that, right?
On the contrary, what's happening is every time he goes too far, the system that is in place holds him accountable and prevents him from doing what he would otherwise like to do.
Well, one, so prevents is the
no, that's not true either.
Checked after the fact. So he's already done.
That's how the system works, right?
Not ideally. You don't have a
no,
to break the rules over and over and over again, and then getting checked and coming back.
But the system works in that way with every president that you've ever had.
No, it doesn't.
Then they get sued. Then they have.
Presidents don't normally do this.
No, generally you consult with the people within your executive branch to see if you feel like you have the legal authority to do said thing. If they feel like you have the legal authority to do said thing, then you try to do said thing. If the court,
it's called the Office of Legal Counsel, I believe, right? OLC.
Court chance you move on, but Donald Trump, more than any president in my lifetime, tries to circumvent the other branches, not utilize even his Republican majority Congress, chastise and attack his Supreme Court when they don't give it.
Konstantin's argument basically is Donald Trump is a dictator, but he's an unsuccessful dictator. Or Donald Trump is trying to be a dictator, but he hasn't been as successful as he wants to be. What a low bar. What a childish bar that we set for him. Konstantin holds immigrants to a higher standard than he holds the president of the United States, the most powerful position in the entire world. It's insane.
The specific rulings that he wants, and then when he's ruled against, he constantly openly flirts with the idea of either defying the Supreme Court or going around it using any other number of things that they know will also be ruled as unconstitutional. But the problem is the damage is already
he follows what the Supreme Court says, right?
No,
I don't think it works that way. It would be like saying.
But also no. I mean, you can look this up. The administration has been violating court orders left and right. And even on the tariff thing, right? His thing was like, oh, we're gonna try it through another means. It's not really respecting the spirit of what the Supreme Court put forth. That's you trying to look for ways to go around it. And then there's been other cases too. I mean, there's just so much stuff that happens that you tend to forget these things. But like, there's been cases where the Trump administration like lies to the court. They've caught him lying to the court or fabricating information to the court. This is not them trying to obey the court system. This is them violating the court, violating what the court puts in front of them.
Like if somebody doesn't want to beat you up, and they stop beating you up 10 minutes into you asking, saying, well, they eventually listened, right? Well, I mean, the damage is already done.
Well, the damage is not already done in that they can't pursue the policy that they were pursuing prior.
Well, the damage is already done, though, right? So, for instance, for tariffs, he's collected some $200+ million of tariffs. He's irreparably harmed our trade relationship with basically every other country, including the United Kingdom, on the planet. We've got people, DACA kids, who just recently.
This is a good argument. This is a good structure of argument right here.
You've got 2 American citizens that were murdered by questionable, at best, deployments of ICE. You've got the president illegally deployed the National Guard and military to states like California. Like the damage is already done on that. The court eventually says, hey, you weren't allowed to do that, and Donald Trump goes, oh, cool, I'll find another way to get around this in the future. I don't think, especially an executive, which is the scariest thing, because the executive is the guy who's supposed to enforce the laws, him continually skirting or going over these guidelines over and over and over and over and over again in so many historically unique ways, and then saying, well, eventually the court said, hey, that thing that you did 2 years ago that you've already politically and financially benefited from, you weren't allowed to do that. I don't think that's a good system. I feel like it's a dictatorial guy.
Well,
you guys, He was a dictator, but he was only a dictator for a year until the Supreme Court told him no, he can't be a dictator on that issue. Okay, well, you know, if he just keeps doing that over and over again, then he's basically gets to be a dictator for the rest of his term in office, because he's going to keep finding different ways to violate the court or violate the spirit of the law, and it's going to work for like whatever amount of time he needs it to work for. Hitler wasn't a dictator because he was only a dictator for what, 4 years or 5 years or so, whatever how long it was, and then the system, the international system, put him in place, right? So I guess he wasn't a dictator either.
Look, it's not for me
Maduro wasn't a dictator because he eventually got deposed.
to comment on whether the American system of division of powers is good or bad. It is what it is. And what
That's not what the question
that system
was.
Seems to me to be standing up pretty well on balance. Doesn't mean that there aren't individual things that you might not agree with. For example, I don't want to speak about America because it's not my country. And it's not I don't vote in America. I don't live there. I visit a lot, and I like it. But it doesn't mean that I get to sort of say. But if Britain was deporting people,
oh, that dude keeps killing me.
Process, I would be against that, right? So you can deduce from that how I feel about the United States doing that. I would be totally against that. However, there is a system of checks and balances in the U.S., which is when the president does something, which is, or anyone does something which is found to be illegal, you have to go through the courts. And the question for me.
It's funny that he's like saying this because it's like he thinks he's like making a strong point. I don't know if it's just because maybe he's genuinely not super familiar with U.S. politics. This is basic. This is basic ass U.S. politics. This is what like everybody learns in high school. So he's not really saying anything no one knows. We're beyond that. We're beyond that conversation. We're having like a more complex conversation than that. Nobody's arguing whether or not the system of checks and balances is a good thing. Like most Americans believe that to be the case. What's happening right now is the system of checks and balances isn't working because the only branch that has the power to enforce those checks and balances is the branch right now that's violating those checks and balances and looking for every way to violate those checks and balances.
For me, has America become a dictatorship, which is what I think is the important question.
If Konstantin thinks that checks and balances are a good thing, the Trump administration disagrees with him. The Trump administration opposes him on that position.
It is, right? Somebody can have all the tendencies they want. The question is America in a position where its leader is able to do whatever he wants and ignore the law? I don't believe that's happening. And is America in a position where its leader will not democratically allow the next freely elected person to take power? Is America in a position where that's not going to happen? I don't think that's the case either. I think power will be handed over peacefully and democratically. And I think the President of the United States is not unrestricted by the law.
Was it handed over peacefully last time?
That's a reassuring thing.
Do you think a dictator thing is only bad at the very microsecond it becomes a dictator, or do you think that all of the steps leading up to it are maybe cause for concern? Because when we say that there will be free and fair elections, I'm fairly certain that that's the case, but you have the president right now weaponizing his Department of Justice to attack states to look for evidence of fraud in the 2020 election. A case that he's lost in front of courts and to the public and to his own prior administration over and over and over again. Or you've got the president of the United States who's already benefited financially, massively, that the tax department has from collecting revenue from terrorists, which is a thing he knew he never should have done, but he did it, and he's continuing to do it in other ways, and the court will probably rule against him there. You know, insofar as being able to break the laws or whatever, you have a president who has now been granted immunity from committing all crimes as a result of a bizarro Supreme Court ruling. So in a way, that's a uniquely new thing that Donald Trump has been granted, the ability that once he commits a crime, it can never be questioned or talked about because he's the president of the United States. So, I mean, in some ways, he literally is committing crimes that, or he can commit crimes that he can't be ever held accountable for because of new precedents have been created to protect him as the president of the United States.
Sorry, what were your questions? You made, I think, 3 questions.
So basically, I think that the idea that he's not a dictator yet because we might have the next free and fair election, when it seems like every part of his administration is through multiple vectors trying to attack free and fair
Guys, he might be a dictator, but let's just
let's
wait and see.
Correct, that it's not.
Let's just wait till after it happens, and then we can maybe label it that way.
Well, that I don't. Sorry. In terms of the, just say that last bit again.
I think that a guy who is in bad faith attacking all of your democratic norms as the executive is a uniquely scary thing. And you also call it a constitutional crisis. That's a uniquely scary thing. And Donald Trump has shown a penchant for a willingness to do this over and over and over again. And just because he's not at the point where I am a dictator, angling himself and doing everything he can to get to that point, I think that interim period is worth criticizing.
I'm not against criticizing any president or prime minister or leader of any country. I think, you know, it was somewhat humorous to some people, but I genuinely believe that there are good and bad sides to every person and every decision and so on. So there's plenty to criticize every leader of every country for. President Trump is no exception to that. There's lots of things I don't agree with him on. There's lots of things I agree with him on as well.
Give us an example.
But to me, words are important because they have certain definitions. You don't say that someone's pregnant until they've actually become pregnant in the same way.
Words are important because they have definitions. This is a guy who, like, earlier in the conversation was talking about open borders policies when neither the UK or the US ever had open borders policies. But he was okay throwing that word around. But over here now he's like nitpicking. I don't even think this nitpick is fair. I don't even think this nitpick is honest, but like he wants to nitpick now. Why is that?
Call someone a dictator until they are a dictator. That does not mean that you can't say, well, deporting people to a prison in a country to which they've never been is not something I want the leader of my country to do. That is not something I want the leader of my country to do. And that is something that I would want the judicial system.
Oh my God, this guy.
From doing
Every time.
That's my view on it.
Do you think that Donald Trump is uniquely dictatorial in his search for power in the United States? And then if your answer to that is no, in what ways are Joe Biden or Barack Obama or Bill Clinton, in what ways did they test the power of the executive in the ways that Donald Trump has? Maybe using the example of the weaponization of the Department of Justice.
Truthfully, I just don't know enough about all the history of the American presidents to be able to make a good comparison between all of them. So I just can't say.
So are you neutral on that, or do you think
it's not that I'm neutral? I'm uninformed about it.
Okay.
I try not
if I were to tell you that Donald
I find that
Department
convenient.
of Justice to go after individuals using a prosecutor that he said that he truthed out, that this is a thing that no U.S. president in my lifetime has ever done. Would you agree that that's like a uniquely bad way for him to weaponize his Department of Justice?
If that is all true, I just don't have enough detail to be able to comment on it properly. I mean, I think if you had a Republican here, they probably start talking about the fact that the Democrats tried to put Trump in prison, and their view of that would be that that is equivalent, right?
Sure.
I don't
There's a
know.
fact of the matter, though,
I don't know enough about it to say which one of those cases is true. I try not to comment on things I don't know.
Oh man.
Okay.
But I don't see. I think the conversation we're having here is Donald Trump dictatorial. It's not my impression that he is, and more importantly,
how can it be your impression that he's not if you don't have any concept of historically what presidential actions have been?
You're totally right. It's my impression.
True. True. Would you look at that, right? That hypocrisy there, that flip-flopping.
Impression. It's not my hard-held opinion based on the facts.
What would be a line in the sand for you, or a thing that if you saw Donald Trump do it, you'd be like, ooh, that's a pretty scary...
If he used force to prevent the legal system of the United States from enacting its will, or if he prevented a free and fair election from taking place, or the freely and fairly elected candidate of the next whoever...
Didn't he already try to do that? Okay, if he does it a second time, though, okay?
is next from taking power.
So when Donald Trump, I think he wrote an executive order, when he's talking about utilizing ICE to help the states manage their polling stations, would that be an example of that? Because these are things he's already said he wants to do. In the United States, our individual states all run their own elections. It's a very big deal for all of them. The federal government doesn't intervene in that traditionally, but Donald Trump has been on record now saying multiple times that he would like to have more control over elections in the states.
Well, it depends on what those ICE people do. If they're stuffing...
Oh, okay. So now he can use force.
Citizens of the country from voting, I think that would actually help election integrity. So it depends on what they're actually doing.
So they, well, I mean, it's not like Donald Trump is going to say we're going here to prevent people from voting, right?
I'm not saying it's about what he'd say. I think it's about what he'd do. So if the ICE agents are there to prevent non-citizens from voting, I think that helps election integrity.
They don't even have a mechanism by which...
If the ICE agents are there to prevent people from voting who should be voting, or if they're stuffing ballots into voting booths, then that's a different conversation.
If a state explicitly says we don't want ICE here, we don't want the federal government intervening in our state elections, and Donald Trump says I'm going to do it anyway for election security, would you agree that that would be highly problematic and somewhat dictatorial?
Well, it depends on what the reason is for the state to do that. If the state is doing that to ensure that non-citizens vote, then no. If the state says that for other reasons, then yes.
Well, they're never going to, even if they were doing it to ensure non-citizens vote, they're never going to say...
It's worth saying, and I wish you would have brought this up here, one of the rationales given for why, you ever wonder why it's the states that run their elections, not the federal government? They were worried about, this is another feature of checks and balances within our system. If you put all of, like, think about that. You give the authority for the election to the person who relies on the election to stay in power. Do you understand the conflict of interest there? It's like putting yourself in charge of being the judge for a competition that you're participating in. You don't want to give one person who already has so much power and authority in their hands. They control the military. They control the federal policing apparatus of the United States. You also want them to put them in charge of their own election? Having 50 separate elections makes it so that corruption of the election system is 50 times harder. It makes it so that the person who has every incentive of rigging the election in their favor isn't put in charge of their own election. So to trust him to just be like, oh, you know, it's not a big deal if he uses his own police force to go, you know, oh, I'm protecting the elections, to go over there and start managing the own election that he himself is, like his power relies upon. Stupid.
Say that, right?
But
and if Donald Trump's doing for election security, he's never going to say...
But if that was the rationale for them doing it, then I think you'd want somebody to prevent non-citizens from voting, wouldn't you?
Yeah, but it would be up to the state to enforce that, number one.
What
and
if the state refuses to enforce that because it's in their electoral interest to do that?
I mean, it would be up to the people of that state to vote, to have their state do something different.
Notice the double standard here. What if it's up to their interest, the state's interest to do so? Notice that Konstantin didn't ask that same question of the president. What if the president isn't enforcing the law the right way, like the way that he should be doing because it's in his interest to do so? What if the president is trying to manipulate the powers that he has in order to shift the election in the way that he wants to do it in a illegitimate way because it's in his interest to do so? Why does that scrutiny not go both ways? Why is it when Konstantin talks about like, oh, I trust the checks and balances of the system. I trust like the system to be able to enforce itself the way that it's designed to do so. when it came to Donald Trump. But then when it comes to, well, the way our system is set up with our checks and balances, the states run the election for that reason. Why is it now he's okay with the president of the United States trying to circumvent that process?
In terms of the accountability, that's just how our system works.
Okay.
But I mean, like, given that I know that Donald Trump has tried to interfere with elections in the past, why would I even trust his administration to do anything related to election integrity utilizing federal officers, even if he said that that was his intention? I feel like just seeing him send those agents to any state just in and of itself would be enough to say this is a dictatorial action.
Well, no, your suspicion does not make it dictatorial. But yes, I agree with you. January the 6th was not a good look. And
It's not a good look. Your suspicion doesn't make it so. Oh, that's interesting. But the suspicion that there's illegals voting in the state election and the states aren't enforcing against it properly based on your suspicion is enough. Again, notice the flip-flop in scrutiny.
You created a lot of doubts in a lot of people's minds about his intentions when it comes to accepting the results of elections. Democracy depends on losers' consent, and when people lose, they should accept it. But you can also see it from the perspective of someone who might say, well, if you've got a situation where there seems to be, you tell me if this is wrong, but there seems to be some kind of, inexplicable desire to have people vote without ID or to have people vote who may or may not be citizens, that would also make you question election integrity. And
Inexplicable desire. This guy's a political commentator. He's had on so many people to interview. You're telling me that he's never engaged with the argument behind why, or even try to look it up, put it on a fucking Google search and spend like 2 seconds looking up why. Why is it? It's so inexplicable. It's such a shocking idea that people would be against it. Why would they possibly be against it? You've never fucking looked it up and you're a political commentator?
I think people are totally entitled to question it
Bullshit.
and then act accordingly. So
They are, but the process is to vote on your state. Then if you want to have a different requirement for identification at the time you go to vote, you need ID to vote in the United States, just not when you go to the ballot to vote, but to register to vote with
Right.
electronic ID, which I think was like that even in the UK up until like a few years ago. I think you didn't have to show a voter ID.
You still
at
don't.
Oh, you still
So
don't?
that's a problem, and that's
that
something we
changed
need to
recently.
fix as well.
Yeah, so I'm saying that but in the United States it'd be up to an individual state to fix what they want. The president coming in and deciding that he wants it to change, and then given his whole history with election conduct, it doesn't seem like it's coming from a place of good faith. That would be a thing that it does right now worry me as a U.S. citizen. You've seen him invade Georgia right now with his FBI to seize voter information from 2020, and you've seen he's got an entire cabinet. His whole cabinet has refused to even concede that he lost the 2020 election, which is kind of insane, given that we were supposed to be a bastion of democracy and everything, the leader of the free world in terms of liberalism and democracy. So, yeah, I don't know why I would ever be okay with the president overstepping his boundary with federal officers to go into states and enforce stuff and not see that as anything but dictatorial.
Well, as I say, I think you have a legal system that will ensure that the law is ultimately followed, and that's what differs it from a dictatorial system like the one that I lived in for some time, first in the Soviet Union and then in Russia, where you actually have a situation where you cannot remove a person who's in power from power. And so I just insist on defining words in the way that I think is accurate, which is a dictator is someone who cannot be removed from power and who's deliberately using force to violate the law. That to me is what a dictator is. Someone can have dictatorial tendencies. I mean, I might have dictatorial tendencies about parenting, whatever. It doesn't make me a dictator.
No, but if you were the president of the United States, I would be really scared about your dictatorial tendencies.
No, I
the fact
agree.
that Donald Trump has already embarked on so many horrendous actions that have been contrary to every
But
president
as
prior
I
to him.
say, I think he is constrained, rightly, like all previous presidents, by the system of checks and balances that you have. The executive will always...
One of those constraints is that the president does not have authority over the elections, and it's explicitly in the Constitution given to the states to have the authority over. And yet Konstantin here is making excuses for the president circumventing that check and balance on his power. Isn't that interesting?
Restrain to exceed its authority, and there will be other branches of government whose job it is to restrain them and to use their power for their own agenda. That's just
I
how
understand
it
what you're
works.
saying, but I mean, with President Trump, it has been unique. It has been a unique stretch in almost every single realm regarding executive authority. So,
But he is following the law
No,
once
he's
the
not.
judgment. Which laws is he not following? Once the Supreme Court says this is a thing you're not allowed to do, he still carries on doing that thing?
no, but if they say that
Well,
it's not a
that's
thing
what
that
I'm
he's allowed to do, then he broke the law up to that point.
Okay, but the moment, well, but if I don't know, if I'm doing something and I don't know that whether I'm allowed to do it or not,
Yeah,
right?
what would
And
happen
someone-
Oh, okay. President Trump, he just doesn't know. He just doesn't know he's not allowed to do it, even though everybody keeps telling him that. Even though he has access to a shitload of different like lawyers and people that he can ask that question, he just doesn't know. He's just a baby. He's just a baby. He doesn't know. He's president of the United States. Konstantin seems to defend him a lot. He would have voted for him, but he's just a baby. He doesn't know anything.
Someone comes in and says you're not allowed to do this, and I stop doing it. Isn't that me? In fact, the system working as intended?
No, because what would happen to you if you did that?
I
Exactly. There'd be accountability. You'd go to jail probably, right? If you were doing
Well, I'd pay
something
a
illegal.
fine or whatever,
Yeah,
right.
exactly. There'd be a punishment. But
Right.
for the executive, there is none.
Well, of course, because the executive is not a person. You can't put the executive in prison, right?
Well, because they're the people that put people in prison.
No, because it's about policy. It's about policy implementation, not personal behavior, right? That's the difference.
I mean, for Donald Trump, it is personal behavior. But I'm just saying that the idea that when you say the law is working as intended, if I were out setting buildings on fire and then a police officer came up to me and said, "Sir, we evaluated the last 20 arsons you did and we decided they were all illegal," and I say, "Oh, okay, I'm going to stop setting buildings on fire,"
Yeah.
you would never describe me as somebody who is following the law because once I was told I wasn't allowed to do a
Yeah,
thing.
that's fair. But this
Yeah.
is where the analogy between the person and the executive breaks down, right? Because the president is testing where the law is and finding out what he is and isn't allowed to do. And the Supreme Court's job is to adjudicate on whether
We have 250 years of constitutional law and Supreme Court precedent in legal theory. the idea that like, oh, we need someone now to just come in and just start testing all the boundaries of law. This is a dumb fuck narrative that the right has been pushing lately. Yeah, I don't know. Say it's just it's a stupid narrative that they're pushing.
Whether what he's doing is compliant with the law or not.
I think
it's not like
world...
he knows that you're not supposed to set a building on fire and then goes and sets it on fire. He is questioning the way that the system should work. He implements a policy.
It's just an honest question. He just doesn't know. Just an interesting question that he has. It's not that he has a motivation. It's not that when you look at the behavior and you look at the conversations that are had around it, you look at the conversations he has with other people around it, that you look at his interests, his conflict of interest. It's not that they all align with him trying to use and manipulate and abuse the power that he has in order to benefit himself. It couldn't be those things. It's that he just doesn't know. He doesn't know what the boundaries of his power. No one knows. And somebody needed to test it. Someone needed to run a lab experiment. Otherwise, there would be no way for us to fucking know.
Supreme Court says you're not supposed to do this, he stops doing it.
I think there's a world where that can be the case, and I think there are times where a president has tested where they feel, when Biden tried to do mass student loan forgiveness, there was a student education bill that gave the president pretty broad powers to forgive student loans based on like disaster stuff, and he thought for COVID he could. And I think that there's an argument on both sides where it's like, well, that would be way too much for Congress to grant without like more specific legislation. Or, you know, yeah, I think he actually was allowed that power. That was I think you could have a reasonable disagreement there in terms of what the president could do. For Donald Trump, the idea that I could tariff the entire planet without congressional approval ever, or that I can go to war with whatever country I want to without approving anything with the Senate, or that I could tell my Department of Justice to target individuals with what we all know are essentially fabricated indictments about mortgage fraud because they're all political adversaries of his. You know, issue that I can invoke the Alien Enemies Act so that I can more quickly deport Venezuelans because I'm trying to claim that Venezuela is actively invading the United States of America because they have gangs there. I don't think that these are good faith tests of the law. There's just a guy breaking the law and then giving some pretextual basis for why they were allowed to do the thing that they did.
We have 15 minutes left, gentlemen, wherever you guys want to go.
Fine. I think we just disagree fundamentally. To me, the question is America becoming a dictatorship? From what I observe, I don't see that.
Okay. Why do you agree that if you could push a button right now to vote for Trump or Kamala Harris a year ago, my guess is you would probably favor Trump?
Well, I don't know what Kamala Harris would have done with this year, but probably, yeah.
What do you think Donald Trump did over the past year and a half, or what policies does he have versus Kamala that you think made Trump a superior candidate or do better than Kamala would have?
I think, look, again, I come back to this thing.
I chose the wrong Zoid for this match.
So my judgment of President Trump is
right off the bat.
American citizen. An American citizen will care about the cost of living in America, about immigration into the United States. These are things that don't affect me, that I don't care about, right? Because I don't live in America. So for me, I can't judge him on that. I can judge him on the things that affect people in the rest of the world. I think the number one thing that I would absolutely I say is incredibly important that he's done is he's made Europe and Britain realize that their military and foreign policy has been a gigantic disaster and combine that.
UK's military and foreign policy has been an absolute disaster. How? I hate when people say this thing like, oh, because of Donald Trump, now the Europeans realize they need to contribute more to their defense spending and NATO spending and everything. And it's like, number one, Republicans were using that same rhetoric prior to Donald Trump ever entering politics. That's an old talking point. Donald Trump did not invent it. He, got it from other people. Number two, the UK is not at war with anybody, nor are they in threat of being at war with anybody. Well, I mean, what are they doing wrong with respect to military? Like, what exactly? I guess England is falling because their military can't keep up with the people that are trying to invade their country. Oh, that's right. There is nobody actually invading their country. There is nobody that's at war with them right now. There's nobody that wants to be at war with them right now. So what are we fucking talking about? This is like one of those talking points that Republicans just keep repeating, and like people don't really think of to question like what it actually means. It reminds me of like the NATO thing. Like, oh, NATO isn't paying their fair share. Their fair share of what, motherfucker? It's a defensive pact. There's no like NATO, I don't know, NATO, like a huge staff of NATO personnel that the United States is paying for. It's countries contribute their military resources to NATO in the event that they're needed, but they're a defensive pact and they're not at war right now. They haven't been at war. There's no, realistically, beyond like talking points and people who are, convinced by media that's out there, there's no country that wants to have a war with NATO. Which country? China? China wants to have a war with NATO? Russia wants to have a war with NATO? Some people might say yes to those questions because it's a talking point, but like really think that out for a second. China, that wants to be one of the global superpowers or the global superpowers, they want to have a war with NATO? Why? So they could have those ambitions thwarted? Does anybody actually think, are you stupid enough to think that China would be able to summarily win a war against the collection of the most powerful, well-funded, advanced, and experienced militaries in the world, with more force projection than any other military in the world? You think that's going to work out for China? You think China wants to do that? Makes no fucking sense. Russia. Why is Russia invading Ukraine, who they, like a smaller country, GDP-wise, military-wise, military tradition-wise, military technology-wise, and they can't do shit. They're fucking stuck over there, making a goddamn fool of themselves. Why aren't they invading all these other countries if they actually are so big and bad? Why aren't they invading NATO? Because they know they're not fucking stupid like the population of Republicans who fall for these dog shit talking points. Putin might talk a lot of shit, but he's smart enough to know that he can't actually do goddamn fucking thing about NATO. So this idea that the European countries weren't paying their fair share in NATO, for fucking what? For what? It's not like I am fronting my friend. I go out with a group of friends and I pay for my friend's meal. That's not happening with NATO. There's nothing to pay for, realistically. Other than like maybe stockpiling weapons and military equipment and everything for like some potential theoretical war. But again, which war? Who's going to fucking do? China or Russia is not going to do it. If China and Russia are not going to do it, there's nobody else in the fucking world that's going to do it. It's stupid. It's silly. I don't know. Anyways.
That with energy and industry and economic policy, and that they have not been funding their defense in anything like the level that we need. We've made ourselves reliant, well, not Britain so much, but Europeans made themselves incredibly reliant on Russian hydrocarbons, Russian energy, Russian gas, Russian oil, and that meant that when the war in Ukraine broke out, Europe was completely toothless in responding to that invasion, to the point where the Germans' first offer to the Ukrainians was 5,000 helmets. That's what they offered the Ukrainians in support. So what President Trump has done is he's come in and he said, look, we are happy to...
Is that actually the case? Is it the case that Britain couldn't give them military supplies, or did they just not want to, and there wasn't the political will to do so, or they were reluctant to do so because they didn't want to, like they were nervous about tensions with Russia? Would that have changed if these governments had more military might, more military spending? I don't think so. I don't think anything changes in the calculus there. I don't know.
To be allies with you, but you guys are going to have to carry your own weight. You're going to have to fund your own defense. He's been saying this, by the way, for...
They're going to have to fund their own defense. Defense against what? What are you talking about? I can't... it pisses me off that they keep saying this shit, and nobody thinks to question them on it. Defend against what? What are you talking about? They need to fund their own... They are defunding their own defense. That's like telling me right now that I'm not funding my own defense. There's nobody in here attacking me right now. What are you... What are you complaining? What are you talking about? Bro, you're not doing enough right now to do... I just feel like you're not doing enough to defend yourself, right? There's nobody in here. What are you talking about? And why do we all pretend that like this person over here talking like that isn't talking like a fucking retard? Why do we do that for? Why do we just like give them a pass on saying stupid shit like this? It makes no sense. It doesn't make sense.
For a very long time, when the Germans openly laughed in his face when he told them all of these things. He has forced Europe to take seriously its own defense. I think that's an incredibly good thing.
They weren't taking their defense seriously until Trump came along. I mean, at this point, they think they need to defend themselves from the United States. That's like saying, oh, if not for Trump threatening to rape you, you wouldn't have taken the threat of rape seriously. Oh, well, thank you. Thank you so much. I wasn't worried about being raped until you came along and started threatening to rape me. You're such a great guy. Thank you so much.
And I think it's an incredibly important thing because we live in a world now in which you're going to see more conflict. We're going to have to get better at defending ourselves.
Why do we live in a world now where you're going to see more conflict? Is it because we've spent the past 10 years ginning up racial and religious tension between people, spreading stuff online to radicalize people, to constantly be thinking about how other people aren't like them, shouldn't be like them, shouldn't be around them, and that we need to have like racial and ethnic and religious division? Is it because we've now created a world where the president of the United States is threatening other countries? Is it because we've created a world now where the United States has been signaling over and over again that we're not going to support our allies? Is that why the world is more dangerous now? Is that why? But we're supposed to give like Trump a big fucking hand job because he's done such a great job? I think that like Republican politics, and Donald Trump specifically, are part and parcel to why we live in a world that's more dangerous now. I think the world was moving in an opposite direction prior to this shit happening, honestly.
And also projecting our power abroad. And so just on this, and that means necessarily we have to have certain changes in terms of our domestic policy when it comes to things like energy, when it comes to things like growing the economy, when it comes to mass immigration. All of these things he has forced Europe to reckon with on a realistic basis instead of living in cloud cuckoo land where we've been living for a very long time. So to me, that is a huge achievement of his administration for which I am very grateful.
Okay, so I don't understand how it feels like we're reframing a whole bunch of issues or problems that Trump has caused and then trying to claim that these are somehow beneficial to
Thank
the
you.
economy of Europe. So the idea that Europe has to take its own defense seriously, why? Because the United States has decided to abdicate its military role across the planet. I don't understand how this is to be seen as a positive. I think that Europe, broadly speaking, has enjoyed a pretty good century of peace, prior or post World War II compared to the centuries beforehand. I think a lot of this is because of NATO, the expansion of NATO, because of U.S. protection of basically everybody around the world. Number one for Europe, from the U.S. side, is very annoying to me because we've spent so much money on our military with the understanding that there are benefits that we get from being friends with every single country around the planet, being able to ensure free shipping everywhere, being able to share intelligence and do military operations if we need to. And now it feels like our entire military investment was for naught. And now Europe is being told, well, you guys have to figure your own stuff out, even though Europe had largely entered this agreement with the United States, saying that like you're going to be our nuclear umbrella, you're going to cover a lot of the military projects, and then we're all going to kind of grow economically in the meantime. I don't know how Trump basically pulling the rug out from Europe on that and saying, well, you guys need to figure it out for yourself. Whatever Europe figures out for itself, it's going to be a worse arrangement than what existed before. It's not like Europe as a continent was struggling with their military defense as the United States stood by and watched all of it be destroyed. I think Europe enjoyed the ability to grow economically and to prosper more than it would have if every single country, or if a European Union, which has its own set of problems, were investing in their own military might. Number one for the military thing. For the trade thing, I mean, the United States has undercut now its trading relationship with the European Union, and I think sadly even with the United Kingdom, regardless of what people think at the time. I think we can safely say that MAGA and the Brexit movement kind of like grew up together and shared a lot of similar rhetoric. It's kind of crazy to me that the United Kingdom, which is one of the only exporter economies or that we exported more than we imported from, somehow still got punished with tariffs, that the United States didn't honor that trade surplus that we had with them or honor any of the prior commitments or history, and now the United Kingdom has gotten screwed by the U.S. tariff regime, along with the rest of Europe. And the idea of saying, well, Europe's going to have to figure out its own stuff because the United States has abandoned Europe is a good thing. I don't understand that. I feel like if my position was I wanted to create a weaker Europe, when we talk about Russia, I want to create a weaker Europe in any way possible. I don't know what I would say differently than what Donald Trump has essentially already done. Like if I'm Putin or if I'm Russia and I'm looking at the U.S. and Europe, my ideal circumstance is, the United States just told Europe to deal with their own shit. That's awesome for me. I feel like the U.S. being the umbrella for Europe is very much not awesome for me if I'm speaking from the Russian perspective.
Okay, so on the tariffs, I didn't say anything about tariffs because it's not a policy. Truthfully, I'm not entirely sure whether it's a policy that actually is going to work or not in the way that he claims. So I don't know. It's not instinctively something I'm a massive fan of, but it doesn't mean that it might not work. I don't know. But in terms of your other point about security, the Americans, I don't know if did you catch Marco Rubio's speech that he gave?
Yep.
Yeah. So he was explicitly saying the exact opposite of what you just said. He was not saying we are withdrawing our support from Europe. What he was saying is we want to be allies and friends with Europe, but we cannot do it on the basis that we protect you. It has to be on the basis that we work together to protect each other. That's what an alliance is. It's when people...
Yeah, I mean, Destiny shouldn't have even given this point because the United States isn't protecting Europe. There's no threat to Europe. These other countries don't have an actual threat to Europe. So that's number one. And then the other thing is what Marco Rubio was actually saying was that rhetoric was laced with this white man's burden kind of theme to it, with this idea that we need to go out there and start colonizing the rest of the planet like we used to do in the 1700s. That was basically what he was saying. He was saying we want you guys to be like us, where we're a bunch of ethnic nationalists that are going out there and subjugating the rest of the planet. That's what he was saying. He wasn't saying we're in this together, guys. We just want you guys to be cool and strong like us. No, he was saying we don't like liberalism, we don't like multiculturalism. We want you guys to become like us, where we're this authoritarian, ethnic nationalist kind of politics. Donald Trump and the Trump movement, they've already allied themselves with people who's it, Orban and Netanyahu. These are people with the mentalities of cultural subjugation, illiberalism, and ethnic domination of other minorities, small time, whatever groups, and a religious war against other groups. That's what that speech by Marco Rubio was. It wasn't simply just we just want you guys to start lifting weights with us, bro.
work together for a common purpose. A lot of countries in Europe have been doing what we in Britain call taking the piss for a long time, which is they've not even been funding their NATO obligations to the level that they were supposed to because they've been taking advantage of America. Now, the problem with taking advantage of America is I don't want Britain and Europe to be America's poodle. I want Britain, the country of which I'm a citizen, to be independently powerful and influential. If you want to be independently powerful and influential, you have to have a strong economy, and you have to have a strong military, and you have a strong industrial base. So the fact that the Americans are challenging Europeans to do more is not the same as America withdrawing its support or its nuclear umbrella. We, by the way, in Britain and in France, have nuclear weapons, and if, well, we hope that they still work, given the way we've been funding them, but we think we have nuclear weapons that work, and so we don't need to be relying on the American nuclear umbrella. What we should be relying on is our own strength and our own economies, and then, of course, partnership with other countries, including the United States. I'm not hearing anything out of the United States which is about abandoning its relationship with Europe. It's about encouraging Europe to also be strong and to be competent. I mean, we are at a point in Britain where we basically cannot make our own virgin steel, which means we can't make the things you make out of steel. We don't have a powerful industry to be able to make anything that's militarily useful at the scale that we need to. We would run out of ammunition. I don't remember the exact numbers. I'd have to look it up, but it's like within 2 weeks or something of a full war. And the decline in British manufacturing has been catastrophic. It's the same in all of the rest of Europe. Encouraging Europe and Britain to abandon that suicidal course, I think, is incredibly powerful and beneficial for this country and for Europe, and that's why I'm glad he's done that. In addition to that, I mean, we can look at you asked me what I support of the things that he's done. I think President Trump, if you look at his first term and now, he is someone who's taken a totally different approach to the Middle East. The Abraham Accords were a great step forward. I think with Jared Kushner negotiating in the Middle East, and also, you know,
the Abraham Accords were such a great step forward that we have we have October 7th, we have the Gaza war, and now we have a war in Iran. It was so effective.
Hardline policy that he's taken on Iran, dealing with their plans for nuclear enrichment. These are all very positive developments because, of course, if Iran was allowed to develop nuclear weapons, the first thing that would happen is the Saudis would try and get them as well.
And Iran, by the way, we had the JCPOA. We had an agreement with Iran. Oh, fuck. To not produce nuclear bombs. And Donald Trump's the one who pulled us out of that. And it's like giving credit now to Donald Trump for what, I guess, making it less likely that they get like nuclear bombs. But the entire reason that we're even in this position in the first place is because Donald Trump pulled us out of that agreement.
It would destabilize the entire region. So for that reason, his foreign policy has been really, really strong in my opinion, which is why I'm a big fan of it.
Sure. So there's one other thing I want to hit on before we finish. I guess as a quick thing, whatever Europe builds militarily absent the United States is going to be worse than the United States taking care of Europe militarily. And I think the United States gains a great deal of influence as a result of this. It was only under Donald Trump.
That's what I'm saying is I don't want us to be a lapdog to America. I want us to be independently strong.
That's fine, but I don't want to be mean about this, okay? But if we're realistic about the United Kingdom, we're realistic about Europe, and we're realistic about where everybody's obsessive investments have been over the past century, right? The United States invested heavily in a lot of military stuff. Whatever the UK and Europe will look like as a military thing, it's going to be significantly worse than if the United States is essentially doing.
That's precisely what I'd like to end.
That won't end. That's impossible for that to end. That will never end because we blow things up and we fuck shit up. That's what we do in the United States. We've invested trillions of dollars year after year after year after year after year in this technology, and the idea that the UK, which is also struggling, or even all of Europe, which might be struggling in other areas, is going to magically catch up to the United States in that.
No, we're not going to catch up, but we are going to be strong enough relative to the size of our country. And
maybe, but at such an unnecessary cost. Like right now, what is the pressure? You talk about
who are you to decide what military Britain should have?
The defenders of Britain. What do you mean? Like if nobody is going to invade a country,
who elected you?
Interesting. Again, look at the hypocrisy there. Who elected you to decide what kind of military Britain has? Weren't you just praising Trump for, I guess, like pressuring you guys to decide what kind of military you guys need to have now?
To decide whether Britain should have a military or not.
When European countries
to be able to defend itself,
to
have a strong economy, to have a strong industrial base, to have jobs for British people. That's what I'd like, and I don't take kindly to an American coming over here and telling us we're going to be shit at blowing things up. This country has a great history of blowing things up. Thank you very much.
Yeah, that's fine, but the reality is whatever country you're trying to enact or design is going to be worse off in a world where the United States doesn't. You can say no, but that's the reality of the case. It will be.
If we are more powerful, we will get more of what we want for our country. That's how power works.
I'm just curious, what is the projected timeline for that? Because none of that has worked out since you didn't become more powerful from Brexit. I don't see the more power coming in from.
What does Brexit have to do with this?
With this idea that isolating yourselves, and not necessarily just the UK, but that further isolation and entrenchment into your own autarky-like fantasies are.
No. I'm not in favor of isolation. Europe has not been doing what it needs to work collectively together to be stronger, right?
Because it hasn't needed to, right?
What I want is for Britain and other European countries.
What are you talking about? The EU? What do you think the EU is? The EU, which the UK pulled out of, by the way. The EU is European countries working together to create a like economic bloc and a geopolitical bloc. What are you talking about?
and America to be stronger together, given the challenges we face from Putin's Russia, China, Iran, and other threats. That's what I want. The cloud cuckoo world of holding hands and singing Kumbaya is over. The geopolitical moment now is going to be more violent, more disruptive, and we need to be ready for that in this country, in Europe, and in America. And we should
when you listen to European leaders
but
talking,
in order for that to happen, European countries, Britain and America all have to be stronger. And what Trump is saying to, and what Marco Rubio was saying to Europeans is, let's be stronger together by you taking ownership and responsibility.
Sure.
That's what I want.
And I'll just say that spending the better part of the last year threatening to invade Greenland, I don't think it's done much to foster positive resentment in Europe towards the United States, but I guess we'll see where that play out. Just one more thing. I see this rewritten a lot in the media. I see you talk about it, a lot of other people talk about it. Why is it that so many people are obsessed with pretending that when Donald Trump said that there were good people on both sides of that Charlottesville protest, why are people pretending that it was anything other than saying that the people in like the far-right neo-Nazi march had like good people in it? I don't understand where this like historical rewriting comes from.
Have you seen the clip?
Yes, I've seen all the speeches.
So you've seen that he says, I'm not talking about the KKK and neo-nationalists who should be condemned totally. I'm talking about some of the people who were there to protest about the statues.
Yeah, but that doesn't make sense because it was a KKK neo-Nazi march.
Well, what he's saying is that there were two groups there.
But there weren't.
Hold on. What he's saying, just let me finish the argument and then we can talk about it, is that there were people who were there to protest about the statues being removed, and there were also people there who were neo-Nazis. That is what he's saying. So
but it's not true.
What do you mean it's not true?
It was a unite the right, far right, neo-Nazi KKK.
And there were also some people there to protest about the statues. There was no people who were there to protest about the statues.
There might have been one or two, but like...
Hold on. There were no people there who were there to protest about the statues who are not neo-Nazis.
Hold on a second. I'd flip this around. There were people there that were... Who are the people there that were there to protest the statues who weren't part of this group? Because again, this is that flip-flop, that hypocrisy in the standards that you use here, right? The standard you're setting for Destiny is like, oh, Destiny, you're telling me that there's not even a single person. You know that there's not a single person that was there that was against the removal of the statues who wasn't like part of the whole neo-Nazi group or affiliated with them. Okay, well, you're telling me that you know that there was.
I don't think there were people in the Tiki Torch March that were just innocent wonder riders.
Nor do I. But there were also people there protesting about the statues. I mean,
that's not how you would characterize. If there was a neo-Nazi march and there were a few people who just happened to be there that weren't necessarily neo-Nazis, you would still characterize it as a...
Does Konstantin not know that the people that were there protesting the removal of the statues were the neo-Nazis? It's not like these were two separate groups of people. Like, it was the neo-Nazis that were there protesting the removal of the statues, because maybe he doesn't know enough about American history, but those statues were related to like the Confederacy, right? And like slave owners. What statue was it? Was it a Robert E. Lee statue or something? At the right. Removal of the statue of Robert E. Lee. Robert E. Lee was the general for the Confederacy. The Confederacy was a faction that existed in U.S. history, specifically designed, like they only ever existed as a slave state, and they only ever existed fighting a war to try to maintain slavery. And now you have a bunch of neo-Nazis that are going over there to protest the removal of the statue. It's not like these are two separate groups and they just happen to both be here at the same time. The neo-Nazis didn't want the statue to be removed because they believe in white supremacy.
The neo-Nazi march.
No, if that's what would happen, yes. But my understanding is there were people protesting about statues, and there was a this thing that you're talking about, the neo-Nazi march, which was a neo-Nazi march, which is abhorrent, right? And these two things happened at the same time in the same place, right?
They didn't. That's the point I'm trying to bring. Is the only march there was the Unite the Right march, which all of their advertising memorabilia and all of the people who organized it were all well-known white supremacists, white identitarians, neo-Nazis. There was no other group of people.
So there weren't any normal people there just protesting about the statues?
I'm sure there might have been a couple normal people in the crowd, but it was a neo-Nazi organized march.
So it was no more than two people?
Is this the... Hold on, wait, just I just want to understand real quickly. You would agree with this statement. There was not a single BLM whole riot anywhere in the United States, because in any riot, there were not every single person rioting. So you would never characterize it as a riot.
No, I'd characterize it as a riot, but if someone said there were also some decent people who just care about social justice, I'd say of course there were.
So when we saw the videos of people setting car dealerships on fire and everything, and somebody was like, what do you think about like the riots last night that set fire to the car dealerships? And you're like, well, you know, I think there were some good people there. Wouldn't that be like a really inappropriate thing to say? You say, I condemn the violence. I think it's a horrible thing.
Of course, but that isn't what he said. He said, I condemn the people who did the rioting, but we also have to recognize that there were also some people there who were not violent, and that's exactly the...
It wasn't about not being violent. It was about being a neo-Nazi
who were not neo-Nazis, right.
It was a neo-Nazi organized march.
I'm not arguing with you about that point. What I'm saying is what he was saying was that there were some other people. You gave me the BLM example, right? If you said to me there was a...
Do you think maybe he was saying that because he was trying to implicitly lend support to that group without explicitly saying so? And he's just kind of using that as an excuse to pretend like, oh, I'm not talking about the neo-Nazis there. But in reality, he is actually just kind of giving cover for that group of people. Is that possible?
BLM riot, which burned down a police precinct, but also next to it, there was some people standing with placards saying Black Lives Matter, who are just decent people. I'd be like, that's fair enough, but the riot is what matters.
Yeah, but I wouldn't talk about the people with the placards because I'd probably be asked for a clear comment on how do I feel about the rioting.
Well, what he said is there were people there who I condemn, who were the neo-Nazis, and there was the other people. So your argument is, did he defend the KKK and neo-Nazis? I don't think he did that.
Well, every single person that was there that was a neo-Nazi felt like they'd been defended by Donald Trump.
Their subjective feeling is not the issue here.
It's literally definition the only thing that matters because they're the ones organizing the marches. And if Richard Spencer and these other guys are saying, yeah, I think Donald Trump made a nothing burger
the
statement.
Unite the Right rally was reprehensible, and what happened there was atrocious. I don't defend it. I don't support it. I'm actively against it. I think it was horrific. And these people are terrible. I hate all of them. I criticize them all the time. You mentioned, by the way, earlier that I never criticize them. I'm literally the person who, not the person, I don't want to take all the credit, who came up with the concept of the woke right, for which I'm constantly attacked by all these retards like Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens and whatever, right? I believe in criticizing both the right and the left when they're going wrong. The point I was making is that Donald Trump did not defend the KKK and the neo-Nazis. He made a distinction between those people and the others. And he condemned the KKK and the neo-Nazis, which he did.
Sure, I understand your perspective on this, but the people there felt like they were being supported. This exact same thing played out with the Proud Boys before, where he said stand back and stand by, and you can see the leaders of the Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers on Parler and Gab saying, like, oh, we heard you loud and clear, President Trump, and then they showed up on January 6th. You can see the organizers of the march, Jason Kessler, I don't remember the guy's first name, him, you can see Richard Spencer, you can see Enoch, all tweeted out or were given press interviews where they said, yeah, we feel like, Trump was supporting us. It was a neo-Nazi organized march. It's just a very weird thing, and Donald Trump has a history of this inability to criticize people that he thinks supports them for being violent. This happened a lot in the
These are all perfectly valid points on the right, but they're separate from the only thing I've ever said about that, which is the people who claim that Donald Trump came out and said there are good people on both sides, and by good people he meant the KKK and the neo-Nazis. I don't think that's true. I don't think that matches the evidence of what he said.
Sure, although to be clear, nobody made that claim in particular. They said that he said that there were good people on both sides, where one side was an organized neo-Nazi alt-right march.
No, I think he made the distinction very, very clearly, and people do this all the time. They take the words out of context to present that somebody said something they didn't say.
They're not out of context. Apparently every person understood him to mean that he was supporting the neo-Nazis. The neo-Nazis felt that way.
The neo-Nazis are going to pretend that Trump supported them because it benefits them. That does not mean that if you read what he said or watch it in context, that is what he was saying.
If he would have just said unequivocally, I deny.
He said, I condemned the KKK and the neo-Nazis who are there totally, but there were also there people protesting about the statues. That is what he said.
Sure, but there weren't those people.
That's what he said.
Okay.
And so when people try and present him as not having condemned them, that's just factually incorrect. And I care about the truth, and I care about the facts.
Okay.
Those are the facts.
I think the truth is really important, and I think using weird syntactical, out-of-context arguments to try to pretend that one thing was said when every single person understood a different thing, when you're asked to disavow a group of neo-Nazis that are marching, ostensibly supporting you as well, and your go-to immediately as well, I think there were good people on both sides of that, and then you ham up all of these people that were supposedly just defending the tear down of a statue, and he went on to describe, there were a lot of people there who were just trying to save the statue. That's not true. That whole march was organized by alt-right people. If you listed a Trump statement, you come away thinking, oh, I guess maybe there were multiple marches or multiple protests, or there was a decent protest in the morning, and then the neo-Nazis came later, but that's not true. There was a singular alt-right neo-Nazi march that was organized. That's the only one he could have been referring to when he said there are good people on both sides. And what a pointless statement to make of saying, well, some people there might have been good people. That's true of the Nazi regime. That's true of literally everything in all of human history. Why even bother saying that unless you're just trying to obfuscate when you're being asked to take accountability for a group of people
you can have this argument
with should finish with some final thoughts, guys. We are getting out of time here.
All right, well, final thoughts from me is that I'm glad we managed to actually have a conversation. It's been a lot more enjoyable than the first part of it, because I think when people talk, even if they don't agree, I think that's good. I think that it's helpful to understand that putting people in tribes and then ascribing the worst opinions that you wish they had so you can argue with them is not the way to actually conduct public debate. I think.
Except for when we're talking about woke people, right? Or feminists. Or immigrants.
Those of you who don't agree with me might have seen that I don't hold some of the opinions that you hope I hold in order that you could disagree with them, and that a lot of my opinions are actually quite reasonable and rational and based on the logic and facts of what I see. Doesn't mean you're going to suddenly start agreeing with them, but at least they make sense and there's a coherent worldview. So I'm very grateful for all of you coming out, and thank you very much for being here.
I feel like one of the kind of worst tricks that have been played on freedom of speech or debate or conversations over the past 10, 20 years is this concept that as long as people are chattering at each other or in the direction of an audience, there's some kind of actual dialogue or actual conversation happening. I think that you can look at people who play this game of just asking questions, who don't stake out any real positions in anything. You can find them always leaning in a certain direction, always instigating a certain type of behavior, leading to things like the Southport riots, when somebody like Farage just comes out and lies and says that local British authorities are hiding evidence about Islamic extremism from a Muslim jihadist immigrant, and none of these things that are being true, people develop feelings about them, and then the same situation happens over and over and over and over again, and every single time when the people involved in spreading said misinformation are asked to take
this dude's fast.
About the things they've made, it's always the same broad allusion to freedom of speech and good conversations. I think that the arguments that have existed online today relating to the political cultures on both sides, especially the right, mainly the right, are just so unbelievably boring and played out to hear the exact same talking points over and over again about how we need better immigrants, or we need to curb all of this, or wokeism and transgender people are destroying society. And then meanwhile, like the governments that are forming from these people, you guys are starting to have your own MAGA thing in the UK with reform and restore, is just a bunch of empty, hollow promises that just end up destroying the countries, ironically, even more than the perceived threats that they had before. I was promised in the United States that Hispanic people and Muslims were going to destroy my society, and I've got Donald Trump Trump, who I don't even know how many more bombs have dropped in Iran or how many more attacks have gone on, the president of No New Wars, who's basically broken every single promise he's made. But the reason why he's been able to do this and get away with it is because the entire foundation that people drove towards voting for him was created on complete total lies. And I don't know, I hope at some point in the future over the next year or two, I know you guys still have some real journalists in this country. We've lost basically all of them in the United States. I hope that people force the epic centrists to kind of like take stronger positions on things, to not get upset and to put down their microphones when they're actually asked challenging questions about the positions they hold, rather than being allowed to endlessly demagogue about the positions over and over again without giving any specifics, and then to just repeat the same empty, hollow talking points they've had for the past decade that have basically achieved nothing. That's my feeling on it.
Please put your hands together for Konstantin Kissin and Destiny.
All right, thank God that was over. All right, well, yeah, you get the idea. I'm gonna call it a night because I'm fucking tired, and that was kind of a slog to get through. All right, I'll see you guys in the next one. Have a good one. Like, share, and subscribe as always. All right, have a good one. Bye.